Chapter 95. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Today was the day of the induction ceremony for the new disciples. Early in the morning, the hundreds of new disciples in New Blue Courtyard had finished washing up and were ready. When the sun rose from the east, an outer sect deacon entered New Blue Courtyard and issued an order in a dignified voice. All new disciples are to gather in the courtyard immediately and await the arrival of the outer sect elders and deacons of the 3 courtyards. The outer sect deacon's voice spread throughout New Blue Courtyard, and the new disciples in the hundreds of rooms immediately opened their doors and gathered in the courtyard. Although they were all young geniuses of various countries and had distinguished statuses, they were still arrogant. When they arrived at the Sky Pillar sect, they restrained their arrogance and did not dare to be negligent. Especially today, when they were about to hold the induction ceremony, they did not dare to leave the slightest bad impression on the outer sect elders and deacons. In just a short span of 100 breaths, the hundreds of new disciples stood in the courtyard and waited respectfully. Not long after, a white-haired old man in purple robes entered New Blue Courtyard with 3 middle-aged deacons in black robes. Everyone could see that the dignified old man in purple robes was the outer sect elder. And among the 3 middle-aged deacons, Ji Tianxing recognized one of them. Han Qiaoxing. Han Qiaoxing was the one who presided over the entrance competition in the imperial city of Green Cloud. The outer sect elder walked to the center of the courtyard and stood on the high platform in the north, looking down at the new disciples. After sizing up everyone, he nodded slightly, revealing a satisfied expression, and opened his mouth to speak. I am Chu Huaishan, an outer sect elder in charge of more than 2,400 outer sect disciples and all outer sect matters. You are all young geniuses of various countries. Perhaps some of you have outstanding talent, some of you have extraordinary backgrounds, and some of you have great wealth. But no matter what, you are all outer sect disciples of the Sky Pillar sect now that you have entered our sect. All the fame and fortune in the secular world are useless here. You can only rely on your talent and hard work. You only have one thing to do, and that is to become stronger. Become stronger. Only those with outstanding talent and great strength are qualified to be nurtured and valued by the sect. As for those who are unmotivated or untalented, they will be demoted to odd jobs or expelled from the sect. Chu Huaishan's voice was like a resounding bell, striking the hearts of everyone present. His tone was sonorous and powerful. Moreover, it was filled with an inspiring force that caused the blood of over 100 new disciples to boil. At the same time, his short words revealed the laws of the Sky Pillar sect and the martial Dao world. Survival of the fittest. Only with great strength could one be nurtured and respected by others. After that, Chu Huaishan personally presided over the initiation ceremony. After a simple but dignified ceremony, the hundreds of new disciples were officially accepted into the sect. Chu Huaishan announced loudly, the outer sect is divided into 3 courtyards, the White Dew Courtyard, the River Flow Courtyard, and the Wind and Cloud Courtyard. According to your ranking in the entrance competition, those who ranked 5th to 10th will enter the White Dew Academy to learn cultivation. The 2nd to 4th places will enter the Zhonglu Academy to study and cultivate. Only the number 1 disciple of each country can enter the Tempest Courtyard. Next, the deacons of the 3 courtyards will distribute the spoils. After saying that, Chu Huaishan left the New Blue Courtyard. The hundreds of new disciples in the courtyard all understood Chu Huaishan's meaning, and their expressions were somewhat complicated. It was obvious that the treatment and training that ordinary disciples received when they entered the White Dew Courtyard would definitely be the most ordinary. Only the disciples with excellent aptitude could enter the Zhonglu Academy to cultivate and receive better treatment. As for the Tempest Courtyard, only the number 1 genius of each country could enter and would receive the best treatment and training. The outer sect was divided into 3 courtyards. The disciples were divided into 3 classes according to their aptitude and talent, and received different treatment and training. From this point alone, it could be seen that the competition within the Sky Pillar sect was fierce and the hierarchy was strict. The first person to ascend the platform was a deacon of the White Dew Courtyard. This person held the register and read out the names of 60 new disciples in a row. The 60 new disciples, including Ji Ku, walked out of the crowd and gathered in front of the platform. After the deacon finished reading the register, he led the 60 people to leave the New Blue Courtyard and head to the White Dew Courtyard. The number of people in the courtyard suddenly decreased by more than half. The deacon of the Zhonglu Courtyard ascended the platform again and read out the names of 29 people with the register. These 29 people included Jian Wuxing and Wei Lingfeng. But what puzzled Ji Tianxing was that the name of the young prince, Ji Ling, wasn't there. A moment later, the deacon of the Jianglu courtyard left with the 29 disciples. Only Ji Tianqing and the 9 new disciples were left in the courtyard, and it became empty. Ji Tianqing and the 9 disciples beside him were obviously going to enter the Tempest courtyard. But what he didn't understand was that Ji Ling was also among them. What surprised him even more was that when he glanced at the 9 new disciples, he saw an acquaintance. The young man he met by chance in Fengyang City, the grandson of Marshal Chen Kuan, Nie Hao. Ji Tianqing immediately understood. When he met Nie Hao in Fengyang City, Nie Hao also came to the Sky Pillar sect to report. It was just that neither of them mentioned entering the Sky Pillar sect, so they didn't know that the other party was a new disciple of the Sky Pillar sect. Nie Hao must be first place in Mao Ronggua's competition, so he stayed in the courtyard and waited to enter the Tempest courtyard. When Ji Tianqing and Nie Hao separated in Fengyang City, he thought that they would never see each other again. He didn't expect to meet Nie Hao again in the Sky Pillar sect. Moreover, both of them were first place in their respective countries and were going to enter the Tempest courtyard to cultivate at the same time. Ji Tianqing sighed inwardly. Fate was really wonderful. Nie Hao also saw him and was stunned for a moment. Then, he revealed a smile and nodded to him. At this time, the deacon of the Tempest courtyard ascended the platform and calmly looked at everyone. He said, "I am Han Xueqi, the deacon of the Tempest courtyard. From now on, the 10 of you will enter the Tempest courtyard and I will teach you." Everyone bowed to Han Xueqi and respectfully said, "Disciple greets Deacon Han." Han Xueqi nodded slightly and motioned for everyone to get up. He calmly explained, "Among the 10 of you, 9 are the number 1 geniuses of their respective countries, except for Ji Ling. Lu Mingyang, the number 1 of Chongfeng country, broke through to the mystic comprehending realm in the entrance competition. Therefore, after he entered the sect, he directly entered the inner sect to cultivate. The vacant spot will be filled by Ji Ling." After Han Xueqi explained, Ji Tianqing suddenly realized. However, he secretly guessed that there was another reason why Ji Ling was allowed to fill this spot instead of the second place of another country. It was very likely that Ji Ling was the person the Sky Pillar sect was looking for, so there was such preferential treatment. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing secretly clenched his fists and murmured in his heart, "I didn't expect that Ji Ling would enter the Tempest courtyard with me and cultivate together in the future. In that case, I will cultivate diligently and ruthlessly trample him under my feet." Chapter 96. Han Xueqi was still on the platform, explaining the rules of the Tempest courtyard as well as the generous treatment everyone would receive. Ji Tianqing recalled what Han Xueqi had said before and frowned slightly. That was because he heard a familiar name. Lu Mingyang. He clearly remembered that at that time in Fengyang City, the handsome youth who wanted to strike up a conversation with Ji Ku and kill him on the street for his treasure was called Lu Mingyang. If it wasn't a coincidence, then this was definitely bad news. He and Nie Hao had both offended Lu Mingyang. Not only was Lu Mingyang the crown prince of Chongfeng Nation, but he was also an inner disciple of the Sky-bearing sect. In the future, everyone would be in the Sky-bearing sect and would meet sooner or later. Ji Tianqing didn't doubt that with Lu Mingyang's despicable and shameless personality, he would definitely retaliate against him and Nie Hao. Although he wasn't afraid of trouble, this was undoubtedly a potential threat and trouble. Thinking of this, he turned his head and glanced at Nie Hao not far away. Nie Hao was also looking at him with a strange look in his eyes and expression. Clearly, Nie Hao had also realized this problem. Not long after, Han Xueqi finished speaking and led Ji Tianqing and the others out of the courtyard, heading towards the Tempest courtyard in the outer sect. The Tempest courtyard had a special position in the outer sect as it specialized in cultivating genius disciples. Therefore, the Tempest courtyard was located halfway up the mountain on the left side of the conference square. It was a spacious and quiet courtyard. Ji Tianqing, Nie Hao, and the others were led by Han Xueqi out of the new blue courtyard and through the conference square. At this time, there were many young disciples gathered in groups of 2s and 3s in the conference square, sizing up the new disciples. Especially Ji Tianqing, Nie Hao, and the others. They were all geniuses who wanted to enter the Tempest courtyard and were more eye-catching than ordinary new disciples. In the corner of the square stood a young disciple wearing a white robe. This person was tall and sturdy with a handsome and resolute face, but his eyes were as cold as ice as he stared at Ji Tianqing in the crowd. Seeing Ji Tianqing following behind Han Xueqi, crossing the square and heading in the direction of the storm courtyard, his eyes surged with dense killing intent. He secretly clenched his fists and roared with grief and indignation in his heart, "Ji Tianqing, Today was supposed to be the day I reunited with my cousin. I waited for her in the Sky Pillar sect for 3 years. You bastard. How dare you kill my cousin? I will never let you off. Thinking of this, the beautiful figure of his cousin Ling Yunfei appeared in his mind, and his eyes surged with deep sorrow and anger. After a long time, when Ji Tianqing and the others left the square, the burly young man still stood there, unwilling to leave. At this moment, an inner disciple who was also wearing a white robe walked up to him and greeted him with a smile. Senior Marshal Brother Jian Yu, why did you come to the outer sect? What are you looking at? The tall and sturdy young man named Jian Yu came back to his senses, and restrained the grief and anger in his eyes. He glanced at the disciple beside him and said calmly, "There are new disciples today, so I came to take a look." Jian Yu gave a perfunctory reply, then turned around and left. Han Qiusheng led Ji Tianqing and the others into the storm courtyard. They passed through the spacious courtyard and entered the conference hall. In the magnificent conference hall, there was already a black-robed deacon waiting for them. After Han Qiusheng's introduction, everyone learned that this black-robed deacon was called Du Wu. He was Han Qiusheng's deputy and also the second instructor of the storm courtyard. From now on, the learning and cultivation of Ji Tianqing, Nie Hao, and the others would be taught by Han Qiusheng and Du Wu. After everyone greeted Du Wu, he took out 10 sets of green robes and books that he had prepared beforehand and distributed them to everyone. The 10 sets of green robes were everyone's disciple uniforms. The 10 books were the Sky Pillar Sect's entry cultivation method, the Green Pine Tactic. Ji Tianqing understood one thing from his previous observation. In the Sky Pillar Sect, those who wore green robes were outer sect disciples, those who wore white robes were inner sect disciples, and those who wore black robes were deacons. Different colored robes represented different identities, and they could not be worn carelessly. This made him sigh in his heart. As expected of an ancient sect with thousands of years of history, there were too many rules and regulations. Next, Du Wu distributed everyone's living quarters. The storm courtyard was spacious, occupying a radius of 1,000 meters. The courtyard was almost as big as the Ji residence, and there were over 100 rooms for people to live in. Thus, each of the 10 disciples was assigned an individual room. Moreover, each room was equipped with a secret cultivation room. This was a treatment that ordinary disciples did not have. After everyone settled down, they changed into green robes and gathered in the conference hall. After everyone had gathered, Han Qiusheng solemnly announced something. "Everyone, our storm courtyard is the #1 outer sect courtyard. We only nurture the most talented martial artists. Currently, there are only 10 of you in the storm courtyard. You have the best resources and treatment, but you also have to bear the heaviest tasks and pressure. There is still half a year before the inner sect examination. Your first task is to reach the mystic comprehending realm within half a year and pass the inner sect examination to become an inner sect disciple. The inner sect examination is held once every 2 years. If you miss the examination in half a year, you will have to wait for another 2 years." After hearing Han Qiusheng's words, Ji Tianqing, Nie Hao, and the rest's expressions changed, and they all frowned. Obviously, this task was too difficult, causing everyone to feel a great deal of pressure. Nie Hao hesitated for a moment, then cupped his hands and bowed to Han Qiusheng. He asked, "Deacon Han, although the 10 of us are the champions of each country's large competition, everyone's strength is around the 7th level of the true energy realm. How can we reach the mystic comprehending realm in half a year?" Han Qiusheng nodded slightly, and said calmly, "What Nie Hao said should be the same question in all of your hearts, right?" Everyone nodded in agreement. They all felt that this was an impossible task. Han Qiusheng's gaze swept across the crowd, and he revealed a playful smile. To reach the mystic comprehending realm from the 7th level of the true energy realm in half a year, this is indeed an impossible task for ordinary disciples. But the 10 of you are the champions of each country's large competition, and in this half a year, you have cultivated in the storm courtyard and received the best treatment and guidance. If you still can't reach the mystic comprehending realm, then it proves that you are mediocre. You are not worthy of the sect's nurturing and guidance." Hearing these words, everyone lowered their heads slightly, and a trace of shame appeared in their eyes. At the same time, everyone clenched their fists, and secretly swore in their hearts that no matter what, they would complete the task and reach the mystic comprehending realm in half a year. Han Qiusheng revealed a gratified smile when he saw that they were not depressed, but instead had their fighting spirit aroused. After half a year, the storm courtyard will be closed and no longer teach disciples. At that time, those disciples who have not reached the mystic comprehending realm and have not passed the inner sect examination will be sent to the Zhonglu courtyard to continue cultivating. Those who are sent to the Zhonglu courtyard will have to bear the criticism and ridicule of the other disciples. You can consider it yourselves. Therefore, I hope that the 10 of you can reach the mystic comprehending realm and pass the examination to become inner sect disciples. Not only that, in this half a year, you will have a monthly examination every month. The contents of the monthly examination are also what you need to learn during the month. Chapter 97. It was noon and the sun was blazing high in the sky. The air was hot and dry, and it was easy to get sleepy. However, Ji Tianqing, Nie Hao, and the others couldn't go back to their rooms to rest. They all stood in the meeting hall and listened to Han Qiuxing's teachings. Han Qiuxing sat at the head of the hall and spoke with a solemn expression. The cultivation of the martial way is mainly based on martial skills and cultivation methods, but it also needs to be supplemented by the Tao of pills, the Tao of formations, and the Tao of forging. This is very similar to alchemy. It's also very particular about a ruler, a minister, and an assistant. There must be a main ingredient and auxiliary ingredient complementing each other in order to successfully refine an elixir. Therefore, your mission this month is to learn how to refine elixirs. I don't expect all of you to be proficient in alchemy and become alchemy masters in the future. However, you must know how to refine elixirs, which will be very helpful to your martial cultivation in the future. Your mission this month is to refine the spirit-nourishing elixir, green jade elixir, and heart-nourishing elixir with your own hands. These 3 elixirs are all top-grade origin-level elixirs. When the time comes, whoever can refine the highest-grade elixir will receive an extra reward. Hearing these 2 sentences, Ji Tianqing, Nie Hao, and the others all showed a difficult expression and felt a great deal of pressure. They had never learned alchemy and only had a superficial understanding of alchemy. Top-grade origin-level elixirs could only be refined by experts above the 7th level of the true energy realm. Moreover, it would take at least a year of study and experimentation to refine them. Even if they were martial geniuses, to learn alchemy and refine the 3 top-grade origin-level elixirs in a month was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. However, among the 10, there were 2 disciples who smiled confidently and seemed to have a card up their sleeves. One of them was skinny and short, and his age was similar to Ji Tianqing's. This person was called Xueqi, born in a family of alchemy in the spiritual mountain country. At a young age, he had great attainments in alchemy and had refined several top-grade origin-level elixirs. The other person was tall and sturdy, with skin as dark as charcoal. A pair of bell-sized eyes flashed with a fierce light. This person was called Emo, from the imperial family of the Black Water country. He had been interested in alchemy since childhood and had a certain foundation in alchemy. Han Qiuxing's eyes were like torches. Of course, Shi Jingqing and Emo's faces couldn't escape his eyes. He glanced at the 2 of them and said with a smile, Shi Jingqing, Emo, it seems that both of you have a foundation in alchemy, so you don't feel any pressure from this task. However, I want to tell you that the spirit-nourishing pill, azure jade pill, and heart-nourishing pill that you want to refine are all secret pills of my sky-bearing sect. They are different from the pills of the mortal kingdoms. Even if the 2 of you have a foundation in alchemy and have a higher chance of winning than the others, you still have to study and comprehend diligently. Shi Jingqing and Emo restrained their complacent expressions, hurriedly cupped their fists and saluted, saying, "We will follow Deacon Han's instructions." Subsequently, Han Qiuxing had Du Wu take out 10 thick ancient books and distributed them to Ji Tianqing and the others. The black ancient book was very heavy. It was as thick as a brick, and the words "Thousand Medicine Collection" were written on the cover. Han Qiuxing said in a deep voice, "If you want to learn alchemy, you must first learn how to recognize herbs. Your first week's task is to memorize the 3,000 herbs in this 1,000 medicine collection. There is a spirit medicine garden in the back mountain. If you want to quickly recognize herbs, you can use your identity token to go to the spirit medicine garden to study. However, you must not pick a single blade of grass or flower. Otherwise, you will be punished by the sect's rules." After saying this, Han Qiuxing had everyone withdraw and do their own things. The rules of the Tempest Courtyard were as such. Other than when the 2 deacons were teaching or when there was an announcement, everyone had to gather in the main hall. At other times, the disciples could do as they pleased. As long as they didn't violate the sect's rules or barge into forbidden areas, no one would interfere. Of course, Han Qiuxing had just announced this month's goal and this week's learning content. Everyone knew that the task was difficult and felt heavy pressure. How could they dare to waste time? Ji Tianxing and Nie Hao walked out of the main hall side by side. After exchanging a few words in the courtyard, they returned to their rooms to study. Ji Ling was the last to walk out of the main hall. As he walked, he asked Han Qiusheng about his experience in alchemy. Han Qiusheng's attitude towards him was very amiable and answered all his questions. After Ji Ling obtained a satisfactory answer, he cupped his hands and thanked Han Qiusheng before returning to his room. After Ji Tianxing returned to his room, he didn't pay attention to what was happening outside. He held the 1,000 medicine collection and earnestly read it. The afternoon unknowingly passed by. At dusk, several odd job disciples carried food boxes into the Tempest Courtyard to deliver dinner to the 10 disciples. The Tempest Courtyard's disciples were treated well. This could be seen from the ingredients for dinner. Although there wasn't much for dinner, there was only a bowl of rice, a bowl of meat dishes, and a can of meat soup. However, these ingredients were very precious. They were spirit rice produced in the Sky Pillar Sect's spirit fields and the meat of monster beasts raised in the beast garden. Eating these meals every day that contained origin qi could quickly strengthen a cultivator's physique and imperceptibly increase their strength. The odd job disciple that delivered the food to Ji Tianxing was a 12 or 13-year-old boy. He was thin and pale, but he looked quite clever. The boy's name was Xiao Feng. When he first met Ji Tianxing, he was somewhat reserved, as if he was afraid of this genius disciple of the Tempest Courtyard. Ji Tianxing had a friendly look on his face as he chatted with him for a while. Only then did he know what was going on. It turned out that odd job disciples had a very low status in the Sky Pillar sect. They were all treated as servants by the official disciples. In particular, some genius disciples looked down on the odd job disciples. They would scold and beat them up if they felt the slightest disrespect. Xiao Feng once delivered food to a certain Tempest Courtyard disciple. He only coughed a few times while eating and was beaten half to death by that disciple. He was bedridden for half a month. If odd job disciples wanted to have dignity and freedom, there were only two paths they could take. They could either reach the 5th level of the True Element Realm and pass the Outer Disciple exam to become an Outer Disciple, or they could do 10 years of hard labor. When the 10 years were up, they would be expelled from the Sky Pillar sect and return to the mortal world. In short, there were many rules in the Sky Pillar sect. The strong and the weak could be seen everywhere. The strong were respected and the weak were lowly. After eating dinner, Ji Tianxing felt that his essence qi was abundant. There was surging origin qi in his body. He entered the secret cultivation room, activated the spirit gathering array in the secret cultivation room, and began to cultivate. After a night of cultivation, he felt that his cultivation had increased by a bit the next morning. The sword embryo in his body had also grown a bit stronger. The treatment at the Tempest Courtyard is really good. The ingredients are of a higher grade than what I ate at the Ji residence. The effects are also several times stronger. Although I'm only at the 5th level of the True Element Realm, at this speed, I might be able to reach the Profound Comprehension Realm within half a year. After Ji Tianxing finished cultivating, he calculated in his mind. He was filled with confidence and anticipation for the next half a year of cultivation. Yesterday, I looked through the 1,000 medicine collection. Although I memorized several hundred types of herbs, I didn't see the real thing. In the end, my memory isn't deep. Today, I'm going to the Spirit Herb Garden. I need to compare the herbs to deepen my memory. Chapter 98. The sun rose from the east and shone warm sunlight on the Sky Pillar Peak. Early in the morning, when Ji Tianxing walked out of his room, he saw that there were already a few disciples in the courtyard. Some were reading the 1,000 medicine collection under the gazebo or under the tree, while others were practicing their sword techniques in the courtyard. There were also some who were sitting on the roof in a meditative posture, breathing and cultivating the essence energy of heaven and earth. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing couldn't help but smile playfully. After all, they're all young people who are the top geniuses of the various nations. They all have different personalities and some strange hobbies. Yesterday, everyone just joined the sect and was still rather reserved. Now that they've settled down and understood the rules of the sect, they've all become more relaxed. He muttered a few words in his heart and walked out of the Wind Cloud Courtyard with the 1,000 medicine collection, heading to the spiritual herbal garden at the back of the mountain. It was a full 5 kilometers from the Wind Cloud Courtyard to the spiritual herbal garden at the back of the mountain, and there were tree-lined paths along the way. Ji Tianqing walked on the tree-lined path and would occasionally encounter some outer or inner sect disciples. The disciples walked in groups of 2s and 3s, discussing the essence of martial arts, the mysteries of pills, and so on. When he passed by a combat arena at the back of the mountain, he saw 2 inner sect disciples of the mystic mastery realm sparring on the stage. Even without using weapons, the fight was very exciting. There was a circle of disciples around the combat arena who were all watching the sparring. From time to time, some of them would discuss a few words, seemingly having comprehended some tricks. Although Ji Tianqing had only joined the sect for 2 days, he could feel the strong learning and competitive atmosphere in the sect through what he had seen and heard in the past 2 days. After all, the young elites of the 10 nations were gathered in the Sky Pillar sect where there were many geniuses and powerhouses. Everyone wanted to fly to the 9 heavens and become a martial arts powerhouse that everyone respected. Who would be willing to crawl in the mud and be humiliated and looked down upon by others? The entrance of the spiritual herbal garden was not only protected by an array formation, but there were also 8 inner sect disciples of the mystic mastery realm guarding it. Ji Tianqing walked to the gate and showed his identity token before being allowed to enter. He carried the 1,000 medicine collection and crossed the gate. As soon as he entered the spiritual herbal garden, he smelled the fragrance of various plants, flowers, and fruits. There were all kinds of flowers, fruits, and trees planted all over the mountains. They were all spiritual herbs and miraculous herbs. Usually, there were disciples in charge of taking care of the spiritual herbal garden, and the various herbs in the garden were planted according to their categories. There was a 2-meter-tall stone tablet erected at the edge of each nursery, and there were names of various medicinal herbs. Medicinal collection and medicinal herbs and medicinal herbs and medicinal herbs and medicinal herbs and medicinal herbs, and would stop and observe them for a long time. Medicinal herbs and the herbs and medicinal herbs and the herbs and the herbs of the mystic realm. Of the mystic medicines, mystic heavens, and the my mystic realm was mystic myung was mystic stick pillar mystic garden mystic realm my mystic realm, mystic my mystic realm, mystic and mystic garden, mystic of the mystic garden my mystic. The mission that Deacon Han gave us was to memorize more than 3,000 types of medicinal herbs within a week, and to be able to tell the characteristics and effects of each medicinal herb. At my current speed, I can only identify 600 herbs a day. In a week, I can barely identify 3,000 herbs, but I might not be able to remember all of them. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing frowned and was a little worried. He closed the 1,000 medicine collection and prepared to find a place to sit down and rest for a while. He sized up his surroundings a few times before realizing that he had unknowingly arrived at the depths of the medicinal garden. He was currently at the side of a jade lake surrounded by willows. The surface of the lake was wide, and the clear dark green water rippled as a cool breeze blew. The lakeside was filled with tall, green willow trees. Thousands of green willow branches hung down and swayed gently with the breeze, like the slender hands of a young girl, gently fiddling with the lake water. Such a delightful scene made Ji Tianqing's mood much better, and his mind much more relaxed. He carried the 1,000 medicine collection to the lakeside, and was about to sit down on a stone bench under a willow tree to rest. At this time, he suddenly saw a young girl in a green dress standing under the willow tree next to him. The young girl's back was graceful, and her green dress fluttered gently with the breeze. She looked particularly pure and beautiful. Even if he couldn't see the young girl's face, Ji Tianqing could guess that she must be a gentle beauty just by looking at her slim back. The young girl was staring at the lake, as if she was thinking or remembering something. Suddenly, she heard Ji Tianqing's footsteps. She came back to her senses and turned to look at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing and her eyes met. He immediately saw her face, and couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Just as he had imagined, the young girl in the green dress had a pure and beautiful face, and her white and translucent skin was sparkling and translucent like jade. Under the neat bangs covering her forehead, there was a pair of willow leaf eyebrows, and a pair of big watery eyes, which were as clear as the lake water. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, but she was not cold and arrogant. Instead, she was very gentle and demure, and had a kind of delicate temperament. Ji Tianqing didn't know why, but the young girl in the green dress made him feel a sense of closeness from the bottom of his heart, and he also had a desire to protect her. She was not as cold and arrogant as Yun Yao, who was otherworldly and could only be seen from afar. After Ji Tianqing came back to his senses, he bowed to the young girl in the green dress and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I'm just passing by and want to sit down and rest for a while. If I've disturbed you, please forgive me, Junior sister." When it came to addressing her, he hesitated. The young girl in the green dress was neither a green-robed outer disciple, nor a white-robed inner disciple, which made it difficult for Ji Tianqing to distinguish her identity. Seeing that she was young, he could only call her junior sister. The young girl in the green dress nodded slightly and showed a touch of a smile. She was very gentle. "It's okay, I'm just here to relax. It's not disturbing." After that, she glanced at the 1,000 medicine collection in Ji Tianqing's hand, and asked with a smile, "Are you an outer disciple who came to the medicine garden to learn to identify herbs?" Ji Tianqing nodded and answered truthfully, "My name is Ji Tianqing, and I'm a new disciple who just entered the sect. I'm taught by Deacon Han, and I'm here to learn the way of alchemy." The two chatted under the willow tree and exchanged names. The young girl in the green dress was called Xian Xian. She claimed that everyone usually called her junior sister, so Ji Tianqing changed the way he addressed her as junior sister Xian Xian. Xian Xian did not reveal her identity, and also tacitly agreed to this name. Through the conversation, Ji Tianqing learned that Xian Xian used to learn alchemy under Han Qiaoxing's tutelage. In order to memorize the herbs in the 1,000 medicine collection, she also came to the medicine garden to learn every day. Later, she came to the medicine garden many times, and liked this place with pleasant scenery. She often came to the lake to relax or stare blankly. It was unknown whether it was Xian Xian's personality or some other reason, but she seemed to have a sense of closeness with Ji Tianqing. After the two chatted for a while, she actually took the initiative to help Ji Tianqing learn to identify herbs. After all, she could recite the 1,000 medicine collection backwards, and she knew the thousands of herbs in the medicine garden like the back of her hand. She could casually mention the characteristics and effects of any herb. Chapter 99. Since Xian Xian was willing to help him, how could Ji Tianqing refuse? After he bowed and thanked Xian Xian, he followed her around the herb garden and listened to her introduce each and every herb. This dark purple herb is called the purple heart bamboo and is a rare spiritual herb. It needs to grow for 9 years before it can be used to refine pills. It can be used to refine various types of profound pills that can calm the mind. This blue herb is called the ice moon flower and only blooms on the night of the full moon. It is mainly used to refine the ice moon profound pill and can increase one's cultivation. Xian Xian introduced the various herbs as she walked and suddenly saw Ji Tianqing close to a beautiful spiritual flower, and she hurriedly reminded him, "Tianqing, don't touch that bone-dissolving grass. It looks beautiful, but it actually contains poison. If you touch it, it will corrode your flesh and bones." Hearing her gentle voice, Ji Tianqing hurriedly retracted his hand and gave her a grateful smile. Xian Xian continued, "Actually, there are over 3,000 herbs in this herb garden, and many of them are poisonous. Some even contain poison. When you are identifying the herbs in the herb garden, you must not casually touch those herbs. If you are not careful, you will be poisoned and injured." Ji Tianqing nodded his head and memorized every word she said. The two of them walked around the herb garden for an entire afternoon, and with Xian Xian's help, Ji Tianqing memorized over 1,000 herbs. The two of them chatted as they walked, and their relationship became closer and closer, and they had already become friends. When evening came, Xian Xian wanted to return to her residence, and the two of them left the herb garden together. At the entrance of the herb garden, Xian Xian smiled and waved her slender little hand as she bid farewell to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing stood on the tree-lined path and watched her figure disappear into the distance. A gentle smile appeared on his face. "It's really strange. I have only known Xian Xian for half a day and I have already hit it off with her. Seeing her leave, I still feel reluctant. How could this be?" He muttered in his heart as he could not understand. Although Xian Xian was extremely beautiful and had a gentle and graceful personality, he was not someone who was greedy for beauty and did not have any improper thoughts towards Xian Xian. The hazy feeling he had for Xian Xian was more like an older brother wanting to protect his younger sister. At the same time, he had some doubts in his heart and was secretly guessing Xian Xian's identity. Although Xian Xian did not reveal her identity, he could tell that Xian Xian's strength was not ordinary. She was definitely not an outer sanctum disciple, and was most likely an inner sanctum disciple. As for the inner disciples, they had to wear white robes, which was their identity. Unless it was someone with a special identity, one must not wear clothes of different colors. Therefore, Ji Tianqing dared to conclude that Xian Xian was most likely an inner sect disciple with a special identity. Forget it. Let's not think about so much nonsense. Junior sister Xian Xian and I hit it off well, and I just want to be friends with her. Why should I investigate her identity? After letting his imagination run wild for a while, Ji Tianqing collected his thoughts and followed the tree-lined path back to the storm courtyard. After he returned to his residence, the odd-job worker Xiao Feng brought him dinner. The amount of dinner was the same as yesterday, but the dishes and meat soup had been changed. After Ji Tianqing finished his dinner, he sat in his room and closed his eyes to rest, preparing to cultivate after calming his heart. However, he sat there for half an hour, and Xian Xian's figure and smiling face appeared in his mind from time to time, making it difficult for him to calm down. He had no choice but to sit in front of the desk by the window, holding the 1,000 medicine collection and carefully reading it, memorizing the contents. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed. At this time, it was already the middle of the night, and the storm courtyard was silent. Ji Tianqing was engrossed in reading the book when he suddenly frowned and subconsciously raised his head to look outside the window. His 5 senses were very sharp, and he faintly felt as if there was a pair of eyes secretly watching him. The feeling of being secretly watched made his heart uneasy, making it difficult for him to calm down. He quickly put down the 1,000 medicine collection and reached out to open the window. Swish! In the dark night outside the window, on the roof not far from him, there was a black shadow flashing. Sure enough, there is someone secretly watching. Ji Tianqing suddenly frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He immediately grabbed the black dragon sword at the head of the bed, jumped out of the window, and ran in the direction of the black shadow. The black shadow waved his hand and shot a cold light at him, and the figure immediately disappeared into the darkness. Whoosh! The cold light made a sharp sound and went straight for Ji Tianqing's face, bringing with it a fierce energy. Ji Tianqing immediately waved his sword to block, and with a ding sound, he blocked the cold light and sent it flying to the ground. At this time, he clearly saw that the cold light was a hidden weapon flying knife. Damn it! You want to sneak attack me? Ji Tianqing secretly cursed, and his heart was full of doubts. He ran out with all his strength, wanting to catch the black shadow and see who wanted to sneak attack him. However, when he chased out of the storm courtyard, he found that the black shadow had disappeared into the forest. Ji Tianqing was unwilling to give up, and he chased into the forest with the black dragon sword, looking around with a sharp gaze. However, after searching for a while, he couldn't find any trace of the black shadow, and could only return without success. After returning to his room, he sat on the edge of the bed and pondered with a frown. That person was secretly spying on me, and after I discovered him, he used a hidden weapon to sneak attack me. However, he didn't dare to make a move in the storm courtyard. Clearly, he didn't want to reveal his whereabouts and identity. In that case, this person must be from the Sky Pillar sect, and he is much stronger than me. It is very likely that he is a Tongxian realm expert. But I just arrived at the Sky Pillar sect, and I haven't made any enemies. Who wants to deal with me? Ji Tianqing pondered and analyzed for a long time, but he didn't have a clue. After a quarter of an hour, he calmed down and entered the secret room to cultivate. Yesterday, when he entered the sect, Deacon Du Wu gave each person a book of the green pine art. This was the Sky Pillar sect's entry cultivation technique. Ji Tianqing had studied this cultivation technique and found that it was only a high-grade origin-level cultivation technique. Although this cultivation technique had been passed down by the Sky Pillar sect for 1,000 years and had been tempered thousands of times, it was already very perfect. If he cultivated this cultivation technique, his martial foundation would be incomparably solid. However, after Ji Tianqing read it, he threw the green pine art aside and had no plans to cultivate it. To him, the path of the sword heart was the most suitable and the most wonderful cultivation technique. He made up his mind to cultivate the 3rd level of the path of the sword heart and strive to reach the Tongxian realm within half a year. The next morning, Ji Tianqing finished cultivating and walked out of the secret room. He had just finished washing up and was about to go to the spirit herb garden to find Xian Xian when he walked out of the room with the 1,000 medicine collection. At that moment, the bell rang in the conference hall. Ji Tianqing stopped and hurriedly rushed to the conference hall with the disciples in the courtyard. After everyone gathered in the conference hall, they saw 3 black-robed deacons standing in the hall. 2 of them were Han Qiuxing and Du Wu. As for the other middle-aged deacon, Ji Tianqing did not recognize him. The unfamiliar deacon's face was a little gloomy, and his eyes were filled with anger as he looked at Ji Tianqing and the others. Everyone felt that the atmosphere was not right, so they stood in the conference hall with a solemn expression and did not dare to make a sound. Han Qiuxing's gaze swept across everyone and he said in a low and serious tone, "The day before yesterday, when I asked you to learn how to identify medicinal herbs, I said that you could enter the spirit herb garden, but you must not pluck a single flower or fruit from the garden. Yesterday, apart from Xueqi and EMO, the other 8 of you entered the spirit herb garden. However, someone violated the sect rules and plucked a white sun fruit without permission. Deacon Mu, who is in charge of the spirit herb garden, is here. If any of you secretly plucked the white sun fruit, stand up and admit your guilt now. Only then did everyone understand what was going on. They looked at the people around them with a puzzled expression, secretly guessing who would steal the herb. Deacon Mu also shouted with a gloomy face, "The white sun fruit is a precious spirit herb. It only blooms once every 10 years and bears fruit once every 20 years. As disciples of the Fengyun Hall, someone actually plucked the white sun fruit without permission. This is a disgrace to the Fengyun Hall. I'll give you a chance. Whoever plucked the white sun fruit, stand up and admit your guilt. I can give you a lighter punishment. Otherwise, when I find you, you will be severely punished." All the disciples looked at each other and whispered in each other's ears, but no one stood up and admitted their guilt. Ji Tianxing was also puzzled, but he looked on quietly as usual. Seeing that no one took the initiative to admit their guilt, Han Qiuxing ordered, "Deacon Du, accompany Deacon Mu to search the rooms of the 8 disciples." Du Wu nodded and left the conference hall with Deacon Mu to search the rooms. It's a new week. Looking for recommendation tickets and rewards, please, brothers. Chapter 100. The atmosphere in the hall was very stifling. Han Qiuxing sat at the head of the table with lowered eyelids, his face full of anger. All the disciples were inexplicably nervous, quietly waiting for the result. Only Xueqi and EMO, who were proficient in Pill Dao, had not been to the spirit herb garden yesterday. Therefore, the 2 of them were relaxed, without any psychological burden. The 2 of them sized up Ji Tianxing, Nie Hao, and the other disciples. Their eyes were filled with disdain. After a quarter of an hour, Du Wu and Deacon Mu returned to the hall. In Deacon Mu's hand was a white spirit fruit with a hint of red. It was the white sun fruit. Du Wu glanced at Ji Tianxing, then walked to Han Qiuxing's side and whispered a few words. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianxing's heart could not help but thump, faintly having a bad premonition. Sure enough, Han Qiuxing also showed a surprised expression, glancing at Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing, as a disciple of the Wind Cloud Hall, you disregarded the rules of the sect and privately picked the white sun fruit. Do you know your crime? Han Qiuxing's face was solemn, his tone cold as he asked. Ji Tianxing's face immediately changed, his tone firm as he said, "Deacon Han, although the white sun fruit is precious, this disciple does not have the slightest bit of greed, let alone secretly pick it. There must be a misunderstanding, or there must be some other hidden story. I ask Deacon Han to investigate." Han Qiuxing's face was still cold, his tone low as he shouted, "Ji Tianxing, if you did not secretly pick the spirit herb, how could this white sun fruit appear in your room?" Ji Tianxing only felt baffled, immediately opening his mouth to explain, "Deacon Han, this is impossible. Someone must be framing me." Han Qiuxing frowned, shouting in a low voice, "Stop quibbling. There are witnesses and material evidence. How can you evade? Since you just entered the sect and this is your first offense, I punish you to sweep the floor of the Grand Peace Palace for a month." Ji Tianxing immediately secretly clenched his teeth, his fists in his sleeves creaking. He knew that he was being framed, but he couldn't defend himself. He was punished by Han Qiuxing to sweep the floor, but being ridiculed by others was secondary. More importantly, he was punished to sweep the floor for a month. This would delay his cultivation for a month. Anger surged in his chest, but he could only suppress it. He maintained a calm expression and said, "Disciple obeys." After cupping his hands in greeting, he turned around and walked out of the hall. He left the storm courtyard and headed towards the Great Peace Palace to sweep the floor. Even though he was filled with humiliation, he knew that a lack of forbearance in small matters would spoil great plans. He absolutely could not be rash and impulsive. After Ji Tianxing left, Deacon Mu also took the white sun fruit and left. Han Qiuxing reprimanded the disciples again before leaving the hall with Du Wu. After the deacons left, the few disciples who had been holding back their laughter finally began to chuckle and discuss. Hee, that Ji Tianxing is actually so stupid. He dared to violate the rules when he just entered the sect. His future is bleak. Hee, that kid was punished to sweep the floor for a month. Where would he have time to learn alchemy? In my opinion, in the alchemy assessment a month later, he will definitely be at the bottom. Xueqi curled his lips and said with a face full of disdain, Ji Tianqing, that guy is still #1 in the Azure Sky Kingdom's grand competition. He actually wants to steal a white sun fruit. He really hasn't seen the world. Emo revealed a mocking sneer, after all, he came from a run-down small country like the Azure Sky Kingdom. He looks like a poor and greedy person. It's normal for him to steal things. When these words came out, Ji Ling and Nie Hao's expressions changed. Originally, when Ji Ling saw Ji Tianqing being punished in public, he was secretly sneering and gloating over his misfortune. Suddenly hearing Xueqi and Emo's words, he also lost face. After all, these two people ridiculed the Azure Sky Kingdom as a run-down small country. He also came from the Azure Sky Kingdom and was even a prince of that country. Of course, he was also insulted. But Ji Ling only frowned and didn't have the intention to refute. Obviously, he was going to swallow his anger. But Nie Hao stepped forward and coldly glared at Xueqi and Emo. He said in a cold tone, Xueqi, Mo, you two are singing the same tune to slander Ji Tianqing and criticize others behind their backs. Aren't you too petty? We are all disciples of the Wind Cloud Courtyard. Don't you feel ashamed to ridicule your fellow disciples? Nie Hao was born in a family of generals and was also the descendant of Marshal Qian Kuan. Since young, he was raised to be hot-blooded, upright, and kind. In addition, he had dealt with Ji Tianqing before. The two of them were friends. At this time, of course, he would fight for his friend. Xueqi and Emo were complacent when they were suddenly scolded by Nie Hao. Their faces sank and they angrily glared at Nie Hao. We are talking about Ji Tianqing. What does it have to do with you, Nie Hao? Besides, we don't want to be senior brothers with dirty hands like Ji Tianqing, who is a scoundrel who steals chickens and dogs. That's right. Nie Hao, you are defending Ji Tianqing. Are you with him? Nie Hao angrily glared at them and firmly shouted, Brother Ji and I are friends. I know his character very well. He would never do such a thing. I believe he has been wronged. Xueqi and Emo were even more complacent and laughed contemptuously. This is really funny. The two deacons found the white sun fruit in his room. The facts are all there. You still want to help him quibble? Snakes and rats really belong to the same nest. Birds of a feather flock together. Forget it. Let's not lower ourselves to Nie Hao's level. In the future, we should stay away from him and Ji Tianqing. The two of them talked for a while and left with a sneer on their faces. The other disciples looked on coldly as if this matter had nothing to do with them. Nie Hao coldly snorted and didn't say anything. He had already seen that most of these disciples were selfish and didn't want to be friends with anyone. In his heart, only Ji Tianqing was worthy of trust and could be a good friend. But he couldn't help but have some doubts inside. Brother Ji, you just entered the sect. Who did you offend to be framed? In an antique study room, Han Qiusheng was sitting at the table flipping through books and dealing with sect matters. Du Wu stood at the side and hesitated for a moment before asking, Brother Han, today's matter, you and I both know that Ji Tianqing was framed. Why do you still want to punish him? Han Qiusheng put down the book and his bronze face revealed a smile as he said, Previously, I was in charge of the Imperial Azure Kingdom's entrance examination and tournament. So I am not unfamiliar with Ji Tianqing. At first, this child was unconscious and carried to participate in the examination. He only had the strength of the third level of the body refinement realm. In the end, he became a joke to the people. A month later, this kid recovered to the true element realm and passed through the illusory armament mystic formation. He obtained a spot in the tournament and won first place in the tournament. I personally supervised the tournament and saw the scene of this kid winning first place. He is definitely a martial arts genius that is hard to come by in 100 years. If he is carefully nurtured, his future will be limitless. Hearing these words, Du Wu was even more puzzled and asked, Brother Han, since that is the case, why do you still want to punish him? Han Qiusheng's smile was somewhat playful as he explained. A flower that doesn't go through wind and frost will always be delicate. A baby eagle that is protected by its mother eagle will never be able to spread its wings and soar. Martial arts cultivation is the same. No expert will have a smooth journey. They will all experience bumpy tribulations. This time, I punished Ji Tianqing as a small punishment. I hope this kid will learn to be smarter in the future and not be unaware of being plotted against. The Sky Pillar sect is not a good place. If one only has martial arts talent but no brains, they will not be able to grow into an expert. Moreover, the reason why I punished him to sweep the floor of the Grand Peace Palace was for another reason. Could it be that you have forgotten that there is an old man who has not taken half a step out of the Grand Peace Palace for 20 years? Hearing the words old man, Duwu suddenly came to a realization. His eyes revealed a deep smile. I almost forgot about this. It seems that Brother Han has really put a lot of thought into this kid. However, whether or not he can obtain an opportunity in the Grand Peace Palace will depend on his own fortune. Chapter 101. Ji Tianqing followed the tree-lined path and walked more than 20 li before he found Graydon Palace. This palace was too remote. It was not on towering Sky Peak, but in a mountain behind towering Sky Peak. Graydon Palace was surrounded by lush forests. The forests were filled with tall trees with lush leaves. If one did not follow the limestone path to the peak of the mountain, it would be very difficult to see Graydon Palace. When Ji Tianqing came to the gates of Graydon Palace, he was stopped by a middle-aged man who was as tall as an iron tower. This middle-aged man's eyes were fierce. His face was covered in scars from blades and swords. He looked especially vicious and murderous. It was not an exaggeration to say that this middle-aged man could stop young children from crying at night. Young children would cry at a glance. But strangely, the middle-aged man was mute. Ji Tianqing showed his identity token to him and said that he had been punished to sweep the floor. After explaining for a long time, he was allowed to enter. After entering Graydon Palace, he walked in the ancient courtyards and silently examined the surroundings. Graydon Palace was too large. It almost took up the entire peak of the mountain. It was more than twice the size of the Ji Mansion. There were 4 courtyards in the palace. There were at least 1,000 rooms. But they were all empty. It appeared cold and quiet. Other than the mute man guarding the gates, Ji Tianqing walked around Graydon Palace and did not see anyone else. Also, the paths in the palace were covered in dust and leaves. There were also weeds growing on the sides of the paths. The door frames and the eaves of many rooms were covered in spider webs. All of Graydon Palace was quiet and desolate. It had not been cleaned for a long time. Ji Tianqing spent an hour walking around Graydon Palace and basically understood the layout of the palace. Then he found a broom and a bamboo basket and started to clean Graydon Palace. He first started to clean the first courtyard, using the broom to sweep the dust and leaves on the path. 2 hours passed. It was noon, but Ji Tianqing had not even finished sweeping the first courtyard. He did not even eat lunch and continued to sweep the dust and leaves. It wasn't until the afternoon that he finally cleaned the road. However, he still had to clear the cobwebs on the door frames and eaves, clean the dusty rooms, and pull out the weeds in the yard. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing felt tired. Cleaning the room was even more time-consuming, and he had to prepare tools such as a rag and a basin. Thinking of this, he decided not to clean the room. Instead, he entered the second courtyard and continued to clean the dust and fallen leaves on the road. Time passed quickly. Unknowingly, it was already evening, and the sun was about to set. Ji Tianqing looked at the bamboo basket that was as tall as a person. It was filled with dust and fallen leaves. However, he had only cleaned a small portion of the courtyard. If he wanted to clean the entire courtyard, he would have to work until late at night. The Great Peace Palace is so large. How long will it take me to finish cleaning the Great Peace Palace? Ji Tianqing felt a strong sense of powerlessness in his heart, and his mood became more and more angry and sullen. He simply threw the broom to the side and sat on the stone bench under the eaves of the corridor, wiping his sweat as he rested. Damn bastard! If I find out who framed me, I will ruthlessly take revenge on him. I entered the sky-bearing sect to cultivate the martial way, not to sweep the floor as an errand boy. If I delay for a month, I will fall behind the other disciples. Damn it! The more Ji Tianqing thought about it, the angrier he became. His eyes burned with anger. At this time, the black dragon sword on his back suddenly moved twice. He frowned and asked in a low voice, "Little black dragon, what's wrong? Do you have something you want to say?" The little black dragon's voice came from the black dragon's sword. It said in a low muffled voice, "Old Ji, if you keep cleaning like this, I'm afraid you won't be able to finish in half a month. I have a way to help you." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked with a smile, "Oh? What method do you have? Watch me, the little black dragon said confidently. Then it flew out of the scabbard with a whoosh and flew to the center of the courtyard. It revealed its 3-meter-long flood dragon body and circled in the air above the courtyard, immediately stirring up a gust of wind. Ji Tianqing sat under the eaves of the corridor and watched with interest as it circled in the air. His face was filled with anticipation. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. As the little black dragon circled faster and faster, the gust of wind in the courtyard became more and more violent. Soon, the gust of wind became a hurricane. Ji Tianqing's eyes shone as he whispered, "This is a true hurricane." In the blink of an eye, the hurricane swept the dust and fallen leaves on the ground into the air. The entire courtyard was covered by the hurricane. Not only was the dust and fallen leaves on the ground, but even the weeds in the courtyard were uprooted and flew into the air to form a ball. Countless fallen leaves and weeds were mixed together, forming a ball the size of a room. The green and yellow ball was wrapped in the hurricane and constantly circled in the air. It looked very spectacular. Ji Tianqing was all smiles as he said in surprise, "This courtyard is full of fallen leaves and weeds. I'll need at least an entire day to clean it up." I didn't think that little black dragon would be able to clean up all the weeds and leaves in the blink of an eye. Truly inconceivable. Haha, the hurricane you created is truly a divine tool for cleaning. The little black dragon's voice came from the hurricane. It said with a smug tone, "Humph humph of course. Although I'm very weak, a small matter like this can't stump me. Old G, just watch. I'll immediately help you clean up the courtyard." After saying this, the little black dragon's circling speed suddenly increased by 2 times. The hurricane's power also increased by 2 times, covering the entire courtyard and the room. The tiles on the roof could not withstand the huge pulling force and immediately flew into the sky with a walala sound. Not only that, but many of the herbs and trees planted around the courtyard were also affected by the hurricane. Countless herbs were uprooted and sent flying into the air like weeds. Those large trees were also swept up until they swayed violently. All of the leaves were swept away, flying into the hurricane. The dozen over large trees that were originally still lush with branches and leaves became barren in a blink of an eye. Not a single leaf was left. Ji Tianqing was instantly dumbfounded. After recovering his senses, he shouted with a face full of anxiety, "Little black dragon, quickly stop. You used too much force and caused an accident." The little black dragon was currently flying with all its might. After hearing his shout, it then gradually slowed down its speed. But right at this time, at the courtyard's main entrance, an enraged roar of abuse suddenly sounded out. "Ah! My azure spirit tree! The azure soul grass that I nurtured with great care! Which damned bastard ruined this old man's many years of painstaking effort?" Suddenly hearing this voice, Ji Tianqing immediately quivered and subconsciously looked towards the courtyard's entrance, only to see a white-bearded old man in purple robes currently standing at the courtyard's entrance, staring fixedly at those barren large trees. He was so angry that his beard flew up. Chapter 102. Ji Tianqing was stunned at that moment and cursed in his heart. He originally thought that there was no one in the Great Peace Palace, so he dared to let the little black dragon appear. However, the little black dragon had caused too much of a ruckus and alarmed the white-bearded old man. Although the old man was short and skinny, his skin was yellow and shriveled, like an old monkey with a white beard. However, he was wearing a purple robe, and his aura was unfathomably powerful. It was clear that he had an extremely noble status within the Sky Pillar sect. From the white-bearded old man's words, he seemed to be the master of Great Peace Palace. The dozen or so trees in the courtyard and the herbs in the nursery were all planted and cultivated by him. But now, the little black dragon had created a tornado and destroyed the old man's blood and sweat. It's over. Ji Tianqing's heart sank, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. At this moment, the tornado above the courtyard stopped abruptly and dissipated in an instant. The little black dragon instantly turned into the black dragon's sword. With a whoosh, it burrowed into the scabbard on Ji Tianqing's back and no longer moved. The huge ball made of weeds, leaves and tiles, which was the size of a house, lost the support of the tornado and fell into the yard with a plop. Suddenly, the entire courtyard was filled with dust and leaves, and the air was filled with chaos and filth. Ji Tianqing, who was standing under the eaves, was also showered with dust and leaves. He looked extremely disheveled. The white-bearded old man was even more miserable. He was almost buried by the leaves and tiles in the sky. even though he was filled with rage as he circulated his internal energy, sending countless leaves and tiles flying. However, there were still a few pieces of fish that slipped through the net in his white hair and beard. It looked very funny. However, Ji Tianqing couldn't bring himself to smile at all. This was because the white-bearded old man had his eyes on him and was rushing over with a face full of rage. "Ah, you little bastard! Are you the one who ruined this old man's efforts?" The white-bearded old man rushed in front of him in a flash and reached out to grab his collar. Ji Tianqing felt his collar tighten as the white-bearded old man lifted him up. "Speak. Who are you? Why have you come to this old man's great peace palace to make trouble? If you don't give this old man a reasonable explanation today, even if you have a good reason, this old man will still beat you up." The white-bearded old man glared at him with red eyes. He looked like he was about to go berserk. Ji Tianqing wanted to dodge, but he couldn't. In front of the white-bearded old man, he was as weak as a chicken. "Speak." The white-bearded old man grabbed him by the collar and pressed him against the wall. The back of his head hit the wall with a dull thud. Ji Tianqing felt dizzy. He waved his hands and explained, "No, no, no. Senior, don't be rash. Please calm down. This has nothing to do with me." Even though he was trying to explain himself, his eyes were looking down at his feet. He thought to himself, "I'm much taller than this old man, but he actually lifted me off the ground. How did he do it?" "Has nothing to do with you?" The white-bearded old man glared again. He pointed at his nose and scolded, "You little bastard. Other than you, there is no one else here. If you didn't do it, who else could it be?" "It's little." Ji Tianqing almost said it was the little black dragon that did it, but he stopped in time. After a moment of silence, he squeezed out a smile at the old man. He said with an apologetic smile, "All right, I did it." Seeing the white-bearded old man glare and raise his fist to hit him, he hurriedly explained, "Elder, I didn't do it on purpose. I am a new disciple of Wind Cloud Yard. I was framed by someone and was punished to clean Great Peace Palace. I just wanted to help you clean the yard, I didn't think." The white-bearded old man grinned and said, "Very good. It's good that you admit your crimes." "Humph. These juniors are becoming more and more outrageous. They dare to come to Great Peace Palace to harass this old man. Little bastard, you are messing with the lion's head and pulling the teeth from the tiger's mouth." Finishing, his hand shook and he threw Ji Tianqing into the yard like he was throwing a little chick. Ji Tianqing flew into the air. He drew an arc in the air and fell towards the center of the yard. But before he landed on the ground, the white-bearded old man flew into the air like an arrow and punched him in the waist. Pang! Ji Tianqing's face twisted from the hit and his body broke out in a cold sweat. The white-bearded old man's attack was too tricky. It caused him to feel a piercing pain, but it didn't hurt his internal organs. He fell to the ground with a putong sound, causing leaves and dust to fly everywhere. "Little bastard. This old man needs to throw 360 punches today to vent my anger. Stand properly for this old man." Without waiting for him to stand up, the white-bearded old man fell from the sky again. He gave a loud shout and threw a punch. "Throw 360 punches? Then won't I be beaten into a sesame seed cake?" Ji Tianqing immediately leaped up from the ground, bursting out with all the potential he had in his life and leaped 10 meters away. Pang! The white-bearded old man fell from the sky and punched the blue stone ground. He created a 3-meter-wide crater in the ground and countless dust and stone fragments flew out. Ji Tianqing's heart jumped when he saw this. He did not hesitate to pull out the black dragon sword. With the black dragon sword in hand, he gained some confidence. He calmly said to the white-bearded old man, "Senior, this matter was my fault first. This junior apologizes to you." But this junior did not purposely destroy it. It was a misunderstanding. Please allow this junior to explain. "Explain my ass." The white-bearded old man fiercely glared at him and angrily scolded, "Junior, you are too impudent. You dare to draw your sword at this old man. You are really ignorant and laughable. Little bastard, if you do something wrong, you must admit it. If you are beaten, you must stand upright. Remember this." As soon as he finished speaking, the old man turned into a dark green gust of wind and immediately rushed to Ji Tianqing. He threw a punch at a certain part of his waist. "Senior, I'm sorry." Ji Tianqing had been punished to sweep the floor. He was already full of anger. Now that the white-bearded old man was unwilling to give up, he could only wave his sword and fight back. 10 Mysterious Swordplay. He waved the black dragon sword and used the 10 mysterious swordplay that was passed down in his family. This was his best sword technique. Swish, swish, swish. 3 dazzling sword lights slashed out and enveloped the white-bearded old man's body, forcing him to retreat. However, the white-bearded old man completely ignored the 3 sword lights. He broke through the sword lights in an instant and rushed to the front of him. The white-bearded old man gently flicked the black dragon sword away with his left index finger. His right hand punched the waist of the white-bearded old man and sent him flying again. Plop! Ji Tianqing fell in the middle of the courtyard. He was lying on the ground with a pale face. He bent over like a shrimp and could not get up for a while. The white-bearded old man attacked the part of his waist that made his nerves twitch in pain. However, it did not hurt his internal organs. Chapter 103. Little bastard, this is only the second punch. Don't play dead on the ground. Get up quickly. The white-bearded old man walked in front of Ji Tianqing and looked down at him. Ji Tianqing was filled with anger. He endured the pain and stood up, staring at the white-bearded old man. Senior, are you really going to kill me? The white-bearded old man grinned and said with disdain, are all the younger generation disciples so weak now? You only took 2 punches. You won't be hurt or die. Besides, you've fallen into my hands. Even if you want to die, you'll have to get my permission first. After saying that, he shouted coldly and punched Ji Tianqing again. Ji Tianqing was really angry this time. Since the black dragon sword was knocked away, he used his trump card and activated the 6 flashes of sword chi. Swish swish swish. 6 flashes of dark golden sword chi flew out from his palm and circled around him. They immediately split into 12 flashes of sword chi and formed a sword light net. Swish 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 swish. Once the sword light net was formed, there were hundreds and thousands of golden flashes that crisscrossed and intertwined, covering a 3-meter radius. The white-bearded old man's fist was about to hit Ji Tianqing, but it was blocked by the sword light net. A few flashes of sword chi pierced his fist and made a crisp ding-ding-ding sound, as if they were piercing steel. The white-bearded old man quickly withdrew his fist. A look of surprise flashed across his eyes as he looked at the sword light net with interest. Oh, I didn't expect you to be so capable. This kind of sword light net, I seem to have heard of it somewhere. The white-bearded old man frowned and muttered something. Suddenly, he fell silent. He seemed to have thought of something as shock and disbelief flashed across his eyes. However, he hid the shock in his eyes very well and didn't let Ji Tianqing discover it. When Ji Tianqing saw that the white-bearded old man had stopped attacking, he opened his mouth and asked, Senior, if you are no longer angry, can you listen to my explanation now? The white-bearded old man came back to his senses and glared at him. What's there to explain? How are you going to quibble? This old man's roof has been torn down by you, and the azure spirit tree has also been stripped bare by you. Even the 10-odd stalks of jade soulgrass have been uprooted by you. Whose house is cleaned like yours? Ji Tianqing was speechless. He could only look ashamed. Fortunately, the white-bearded old man was no longer crazy and had no intention of attacking again. He then removed the sword net and retracted the sword chi into his body. At this moment, the white-bearded old man waved his hand and released an invisible force that wrapped around the black dragon sword that had fallen in the corner of the courtyard. The black dragon sword was suddenly wrapped in an invisible force and involuntarily flew to the white-bearded old man. The white-bearded old man grabbed the black dragon sword and sized it up. He stretched out his finger and fiercely flicked the blade of the sword. Despicable little bastard! Who asked you to destroy my spirit medicine? Although on the surface, the old man was scolding Ji Tianqing. But in reality, this sentence of his was more like scolding the little black dragon. After all, the little black dragon was flicked by his finger. His waist hurt so much that it felt like it was broken. He nearly could not hold back and let out a miserable cry. The white-bearded old man reached out again and grabbed the scabbard on Ji Tianqing's back across the air. Clang! He put the black dragon sword back into the scabbard and said to Ji Tianqing with a black face, Boy, this old man will temporarily confiscate this treasure sword of yours. Treat it as your punishment. Ji Tianqing's expression instantly changed, and he hurriedly cried out, Senior, that sword is incomparably important to me. It's comparable to my life. the black dragon sword was not only his trump card, it was also one of his secrets. This secret absolutely could not be leaked. Otherwise, there would be unexpected consequences. But the white-bearded old man glared at him and shouted with a face full of anger. "Important my ass. Boy, you're currently a criminal. You have no right to discuss conditions with this old man." He pointed at the courtyard covered in leaves and tiles and shouted again. "You made this, so hurry up and clean it up for this old man. And those tiles on the roof, put them back in their original places for this old man, one by one." Ji Tianqing immediately revealed a troubled expression. Filled with grief and indignation, he muttered, "Old man, you're making things difficult for me. Those tiles are all broken." The white-bearded old man angrily glared at him and sneered. "You don't want to take responsibility, do you?" As he spoke, his figure flashed in front of Ji Tianqing and reached out to grab Ji Tianqing's waist. Ji Tianqing instinctively retreated, but he could not escape the white-bearded old man's demonic claws that were as fast as lightning. Whoosh! The white-bearded old man grabbed the 100 treasures brocade pouch that was tied to his waist. Before Ji Tianqing could get angry, the white-bearded old man grabbed the 100 treasures brocade pouch and directly pulled out the little ice fox, Qian Yu, who was hiding in the pouch. Poor Qian Yu, who was sleeping comfortably in the pouch, was suddenly awakened when it was suddenly pulled out. It opened its long and clear eyes and glanced at the white-bearded old man. Immediately, it began to struggle violently. "Oh my God! Where did this white-bearded old monkey come from? Let me go!" Unfortunately, no matter how hard Qian Yu struggled, it could not escape from the white-bearded old man's hands. Ji Tianqing's expression changed drastically, and his eyes were filled with a cold light. He had never expected that the white-bearded old man's strength was so unfathomable that he could see through the 100 treasures brocade pouch, and know that there was a little ice fox hidden in it. Moreover, the white-bearded old man had seized his black dragon sword. Obviously, he had also seen through the black dragon sword secret. In front of the white-bearded old man, Ji Tianqing had no secrets at all. Thinking of this, deep fear and vigilance arose in his heart. He stared at the white-bearded old man. He said in a cold tone, "Senior, everyone has their own secrets and trump cards. If there is no enmity between them, they will not rashly expose it. Today I am weak. You are a powerful senior in the sect. If you want to take my sword and pet, I have nothing to say. But one day, I will take them back with my own hands." The white-bearded old man glanced at him and sneered disdainfully. "Haha, you bastard. Do you think I want to take your sword and pet? What a joke. Although that sword and this little ice fox are very rare, I have roamed the continent for 200 years. What kind of legendary weapons and legendary beasts have I not seen? Why would I care about these mere worldly possessions?" For some reason, when he said these words, Ji Tianqing actually felt an overbearing aura that looked down on the world and looked down on the common people. His thin and short body was actually as majestic as a giant. People could only look up to him. After he finished speaking, the white-bearded old man used his finger to pinch the little ice fox Thousand Moon. Thousand Moon repeatedly opened its mouth to bite his finger, but no matter how hard it tried, it could not bite. He looked up at the sky and calmly said, "Kid, it's getting dark. You should go back to the Wind Cloud Courtyard. I've confiscated your sword and pet, in case you don't want to come back after you leave," the old man said. "If you want to take back your sword and pet, then obediently sweep the floor every day. I will see your performance. When I am in a good mood, I will naturally return them to you." With that, the white-bearded old man took the black dragon sword and the little ice fox Thousand Moon, turned around and walked into the depths of the courtyard. Ji Tianqing subconsciously followed him. He wanted to say something. However, the white-bearded old man casually waved his hand and released an invisible and majestic force. It wrapped around Ji Tianqing and flew him out of the courtyard, landing at the gate 1,000 meters away. Chapter 104. The white-bearded old man's methods were truly unfathomable. Ji Tianqing could do nothing to him. After standing outside the door for a while, he could only turn and leave. After he left, the white-bearded old man took Qian Yu and the black dragon sword and returned to a palace in the depths of the Great Peace Palace. The white-bearded old man entered an antique room, and the door and windows automatically closed. He casually threw Qian Yu and the black dragon sword on the table and sat by the table. He poured himself a cup of light green spirit tea and slowly tasted it. The tea was steaming hot and exuded a strong energy fluctuation. It was clearly of extraordinary quality and effect. Chen Yu's eyes darted around. While the white-bearded old man was sipping his tea, he quietly left the table and flapped his wings in an attempt to escape. The black dragon's sword also flew into the air, wanting to take the opportunity to break through the window and escape. The white-bearded old man was still leisurely sipping his tea. He did not even bat an eyelid and only flicked the fingers of his left hand. Suddenly, two invisible forces wrapped around Chen Yu and the black dragon's sword and pulled them back to the table. The invisible force imprisoned them, making them unable to move. They could only lie on the table obediently. Chen Yu struggled a few times but to no avail. He glared at the white-bearded old man and cursed angrily. "Stupid old man, let me go. You're already so old, why don't you have the demeanor of a senior? Don't think that just because you're strong, we'll submit to you. Don't even think about it." The white-bearded old man was not angry. He put down the teacup and looked at Chen Yu. He smiled and said, "I have a name, not stupid old man. My honorific name is Xiang Wuji. Martial artists call me Wuji Spiritual Master. Little fox, you should call me Senior Xiang or Wuji Spiritual Master." Chen Yu frowned and said angrily, "Old man Xiang, although you're a highly respected senior, we've decided to follow old Ji. We won't easily change our allegiance. Don't think that you can win our trust by pretending. We won't betray our friends." The black dragon's sword also shook a few times and nodded in agreement. Xiang Wuji raised his eyebrows and said to Chen Yu seriously, "Humph. You two brats really don't know what's good for you. The rules of the Sky-Bearing sect forbid foreign races and demon beasts from entering the sect. Once discovered, they will be executed. If this old man hadn't asked you to stay and continued to follow Ji Tianqing, you would have been discovered by others sooner or later. At that time, both of you will be roasted and eaten." Chen Yu's eyes widened in shock and fear, and all 12 of his furry tails stood up. Of course, it could tell that Xiang Wuji was not exaggerating. Seeing that Chen Yu and the little black dragon had calmed down and were no longer struggling to escape, Xiang Wuji flicked his finger and removed the invisible energy binding them. He said with an indifferent expression, "If you still want to escape, this old man will not stop you. But you must know that once you are exposed, not only will you be executed, Ji Tianqing will also be expelled from the sect." The black dragon's sword lay silently on the table, not moving at all. Chen Yu obediently lay on the table. After rolling his eyes, he said to Xiang Wuji with a smile, "Old man Xiang, you are a senior expert. Of course we believe your words. Since you are doing this for the good of old Ji and us, we naturally understand your good intentions. Don't worry, we won't run away. We'll stay in your great peace palace. How peaceful and carefree." After saying this, he tapped the black dragon sword and asked, "Little black dragon, don't you think so?" The black dragon's sword quickly bounced twice and nodded. Xiang Wuji poked Chen Yu's little head with a finger and said with a smile, "Hee hee, you sly little fox. You really know how to sail with the wind." Then, he touched the black ring on his left thumb and took out a pile of snacks like a magic trick, placing them on the table. "Seeing that you've all lost your life's cultivation, you're quite pitiful. This old man will give you some snacks. You can eat as much as you want." Although Xiang Wuji said it casually, the snacks on the table were all fruits filled with spiritual qi, as well as rare dried fruits. There were fist-sized pink peaches, basin-sized golden pears, fiery red vermilion fruits and spirit fire fruits, and many other strange dried fruits. Even Chen Yu could not name them. The large pile of fruits emitted a thick fragrance and spiritual qi. Clearly, they were all valuable spiritual fruits. Chen Yu's eyes widened. Saliva dripped from his mouth and his eyes shone. Wah! So many spiritual fruits. I've never seen so many spiritual fruits in my life. Old man Xiang, are you really giving these to us to eat? Chen Yu looked at Lu Wuji in shock and disbelief. The black dragon sword also flew out of its scabbard and turned into a 3-meter-long black dragon. It circled the table and stared at the fruits, drooling. Xiang Wuji smiled and nodded. His tone and expression were very kind as he said, "Of course it's for you. Don't worry and eat. If it's not enough, this old man has more." "Ha ha ha, old man Xiang, thank you. We won't stand on ceremony then." Chen Yu cheered happily and immediately dove into the pile of fruits. He hugged a spiritual fruit and started munching on it. The little black dragon was not to be outdone. It opened its mouth and swallowed a few spiritual fruits. After chewing a few times, it swallowed them down. It looked like it was swallowing dates. When Ji Tianxing returned to the storm courtyard, it was already late at night. Dinner time had passed. The errand boy, Xiao Feng, had left the food box outside his door and had already left. Ji Tianxing returned to his room. After washing up, he began to eat. After a day of torment in the Great Peace Palace, he was now tired and hungry. He finished his dinner in a few bites. After dinner, he sat at the table and drank tea. He recalled what happened last night and quickly fell into deep thought. Last night, that black shadow lured me out. This morning, Deacon Du and Deacon Mu found the white sun fruit in my room. It must be that when I was lured out, someone took the opportunity to put the white sun fruit in my room and framed me. But I've only been in the storm courtyard for 2 days. Who wants to frame me? When he thought of this, his first thought was Ji Ling. After all, he and Ji Ling had a deep grudge. Sooner or later, they would fight to the death. But when he thought about it, he felt that it was illogical. That black shadow is very strong. It's very likely that it has reached the mystic comprehending realm. Moreover, it's very familiar with the terrain of the sect. It shouldn't be Ji Ling, but other than Ji Ling, who else would frame me? Ji Tianxing frowned and thought for a while. Another person appeared in his mind. Changfeng Nation's eldest prince, Lu Mingyang. Lu Mingyang had broken through to the mystic comprehending realm in the entrance competition and entered the Sky Pillar sect directly. Moreover, Lu Mingyang had a grudge against him and Nie Hao. He was a despicable and sinister person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Ji Tianxing felt that the black shadow was very likely Lu Mingyang. However, after he calmly analyzed it, he still felt that something was wrong. Although Lu Mingyang has a grudge with me and his strength has reached the mystic comprehending realm, he has just entered the Sky Pillar sect. However, this person has just entered the Sky Bearing sect and is not familiar with the terrain of the sect. He shouldn't have the guts to break into the storm courtyard at night and steal the white sun fruit to frame me. The person who framed me is neither Ji Ling nor Lu Mingyang. Then who could it be? Ji Tianxing couldn't figure it out no matter how hard he pondered. He sat under the lamp for an hour before entering the secret chamber to cultivate. Chapter 105. The night was deep. On the summit of the sky-supporting peak, there were rows upon rows of palaces and houses. This was the residence of the inner sect disciples and deacons. The lights in the various palaces and houses were lit, but the vast majority of people had already fallen asleep or were cultivating in their rooms. Ji Ling, who was wearing a green robe, was standing at the door of a certain room, holding a square sandalwood box in his hand. He reached out and knocked on the door a few times. Soon, a handsome young man in a white robe opened the door and welcomed him in. The two entered the room and exchanged greetings with smiles on their faces. Ji Ling cupped his hands to the handsome young man and said with a smile, "Brother Lu, it has been 2 days since I entered the sect. I just settled down recently, so I came to visit Brother Lu. Please don't take offense." As he spoke, he held the sandalwood box with both hands and handed it to the handsome young man. "Brother Lu, this is the 1,000-year fire jade that I specially brought from the Azure Cloud Empire as a congratulatory gift for Brother Lu entering the inner sect. I hope Brother Lu will accept it." The handsome young man was the eldest prince of the Changfeng Empire, Lu Mingyang, who had just entered the inner sect 2 days ago. When he heard the words 1,000-year fire jade, his eyes immediately lit up. He opened the sandalwood box to take a look. Sure enough, there was a piece of fiery red jade lying quietly in the box. Lu Mingyang accepted the sandalwood box and hurriedly cupped his hands to express his gratitude to Ji Ling. He said with a smile, "Ji Ling, you and I have known each other for many years, and our brotherhood is deep. It's enough that you can come to visit me. Why do you have to give me such a generous gift?" Ji Ling hurriedly said with a smile, "It's precisely because we have known each other for many years that I know that Brother Lu is looking for spirit medicines and treasures that can cure cold poison everywhere. That's why I specially gave you this 1,000-year fire jade." Lu Mingyang nodded repeatedly and said with a face full of gratitude, "Ji Ling, you're still loyal enough. All right, I'll accept this 1,000-year fire jade." The two exchanged a few words and began to drink tea. Lu Mingyang took a sip of tea. After putting down the teacup, he said with a face full of regret, "Ji Ling, I originally thought that you would definitely be able to enter the Sky Pillar sect as first place in the large competition. I didn't expect that fellow called Ji Tianxing would take first place. What a pity. At the mention of Ji Tianxing, Ji Ling's face darkened. She sneered and said, "It's all that bastard Ji Tianxing's fault. He actually snatched my first place, causing me to only be second. Fortunately, I had another opportunity. After Brother Lu entered the inner sect, I took your spot and entered the Tempest Courtyard as I wished. Even so, I was criticized by many disciples. That damn Ji Tianxing, I will never let him off." Lu Mingyang raised his eyebrows and asked with interest, "Speaking of this matter, I also wanted to ask you, Ji Ling, what kind of opportunity did you obtain? He's actually valued so highly by the sect?" Ji Ling revealed a confident smile and said, "When I first came to the sect, I came with 3 genius disciples and 2 deacons. I once heard senior brother Hao Meng mention that I was someone the sect was specially looking for. I seem to have some other use for them. However, I'm not too sure about the specific reason." Lu Mingyang nodded and said with a smile, "No matter what the reason is, I have to congratulate you in advance. Ji Ling, you are useful to the sect, so the sect will value and nurture you. Your future will definitely be bright. Half a year later, when you pass the examination and enter the inner sect, we will work together and help each other improve." Ji Ling cupped her hands and said with a smile, "Of course." Lu Mingyang was silent for a moment before continuing. "On the day of the entrance ceremony, I saw Ji Tianxing. I actually know that brat. He's quite arrogant." Ji Ling raised her eyebrows and asked with a puzzled tone, "Oh? Brother Lu, how do you know Ji Tianxing? Tell me about it." Lu Mingyang sneered and said, "That was in Fengyang City. That brat Ji Tianxing helped his friend steal the myriad spirit jade pillow that I was determined to obtain, ruining my plan. Since he has also come to the sky-bearing sect, this is exactly what I want. I will definitely punish him severely." Ji Ling revealed a playful smile. "Since Brother Lu also has a grudge with him, then he is our common enemy." "That's right, that brat Ji Tianxing is also unlucky. On the second day of entering the storm courtyard, he stole a spirit fruit from the spirit medicine garden and was punished by the deacon to sweep the floor for a month. In the examination in a month, he will definitely be at the bottom." Humph. Lu Mingyang immediately sneered and said, "There's actually such a thing? Then he really deserves it. I just settled down in the inner sect these 2 days. When I have time, I will also deal with him." Ji Ling glanced at him and the smile on her face became even more playful. "Just now, I was wondering if that matter was done by you, Brother Lu. Now it seems that the 2 of us haven't even made a move against Ji Tianxing, but someone else has already made a move against him." Lu Mingyang nodded and sneered. "This is called committing many unjust deeds leads to one's own destruction. Ji Tianxing is too arrogant and despotic, making too many enemies. There are still others in the sect who want to deal with him. In this way, sooner or later, he will be killed by someone or expelled from the sky-bearing sect." Ji Ling sneered complacently, "If the result is like this, I am really looking forward to it. Ha ha." After that, the 2 of them whispered a few more words before Ji Ling left in satisfaction. Early in the morning, after Ji Tianxing finished washing up, he walked out of his room. The other disciples of the storm courtyard were all reading or practicing martial arts in the courtyard. There were also people who carried the 1,000 medicine collection to the spirit medicine garden to study. He could only go to the Grand Peace Palace and continue cleaning the palace. Of course, even if he was punished to sweep the floor of the Grand Peace Palace, he didn't want to fall behind others and carried the 1,000 medicine collection with him. After arriving at the Grand Peace Palace, he greeted the middle-aged mute at the entrance and entered the palace to begin sweeping. In the courtyard of the second courtyard, the ground was still covered with weeds, leaves, and broken tiles. It was a mess. Ji Tianxing held a broom in his right hand and swept the floor. His left hand was still holding the 1,000 medicine collection as he carefully memorized the contents of the book. As a result, the speed at which he swept the floor was much slower, and the efficiency at which he learned to identify medicinal herbs was also not high. An entire morning had passed and he still hadn't finished cleaning the courtyard. He had only memorized 100 types of herbs in the book. However, there was no other way. He didn't want to be at the bottom of the examination at the end of the month and become the target of ridicule. At noon, the sun was scorching in the courtyard. Ji Tianxing sat on a stone bench under the eaves to rest and focused on reading the 1,000 medicine collection. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke through the air and a cold azure light shot towards him. Whoosh! Ji Tianxing was immediately awakened. Holding the 1,000 medicine collection, he dashed 3 meters away and luckily dodged the attack of the cold azure light. Ding! The cold azure light hit the stone bench and created a fist-sized hole in it. Many stone fragments flew out. Ji Tianxing's pupils suddenly contracted. He looked around with a grave expression, looking for the person who attacked him. Chapter 106. However, just as Ji Tianxing was looking around, a few more rays of green light came from the depths of the palace. Only then did he see clearly that the 3 rays of light were finger-sized green sword rays. The 3 sword rays were aimed at his left, right, and forehead. They were extremely fast and powerful. Ji Tianxing's expression changed. He quickly jumped 4 meters away and jumped into the courtyard from the eaves. He used all his strength and dodged as fast as he could. Only then did he manage to dodge the 3 sword rays. Even so, 1 sword ray brushed past his shoulder and cut a hole in his robe. Ji Tianxing jumped into the courtyard. Just as his feet landed on the ground, before he could even stabilize himself, 3 more green sword rays came at him. Swish, swish, swish. He had no choice but to use all his strength to retreat and avoid the sword rays. Swish, swish, swish. Just as the 3 sword rays dissipated, another wave of sword rays came at him. This time the angle of the attack was even more tricky and the speed was faster. Ji Tianxing was forced into a corner. He could only jump back and forth in the courtyard and dodge the attacks. Within a short span of 100 breaths, he was attacked by more than 300 sword rays. He did not even have the chance to stop and take a breath. Finally, after 100 breaths, there were no more sword rays coming from the depths of the palace. Ji Tianxing also managed to dodge the attack. He sat on the ground with a pale face and panted heavily. He was in a sorry state. He was sweating profusely and his messy hair was also wet. His green robe was not only soaked in sweat, but also had more than 10 holes in it. He looked like a beggar. In the past 100 breaths, he was dancing on the edge of a knife. He had brushed shoulders with death countless times. There were a few times when he was almost hit by the sword rays and died on the spot. At this time, a thin figure walked out from the depths of the palace and came to the courtyard. This figure was Xiang Wuji. Qian Yu flapped his wings and followed closely beside him. Ji Tianxing saw Xiang Wuji and shouted angrily, "Senior, I have already followed our agreement to clean the palace. Why are you doing this to me?" When the hundreds of sword rays came at him, he had already guessed that it was the white-bearded old man who did it. Of course, Xiang Wuji would not deny it. He stared at Ji Tianxing angrily and scolded him. "Little bastard, do you think sweeping the floor can offset the crimes you've committed? In your dreams. Last night, your pet, the little fox, stole and ate my precious spirit fruit. There were cinnabar fruit, fire fruit, ice fruit, dragon fruit, and spirit peach. A total of 28 spirit fruits, all of which are extremely rare and priceless treasures. Bastard, how do you think we should settle this debt?" Xiang Wuji pointed his finger at Qian Yu say, one by one. The little ice fox tilted her head and looked at him. She was stunned and had a dull expression on her face. "Of you, Qian Yu, Qian Yu, Qian Yu, Qian. Qian's Qian, Qian, Qian Yu, Qian, Qian, Qian. Qian Yu, Qian Yu. You've eaten so many precious spirit fruits. I can't pay you back even if I sell my entire fortune." Qian Yu came back to its senses. It waved its paws and explained anxiously, "Old Ji, you have to believe me. It's not like that. Listen to me." Before it could finish, it was interrupted by Xiang Wuji. Xiang Wuji glared at Qian Yu and shouted, "What's there to explain? What's there to explain? Little fox, tell me the truth. Did you eat those spirit fruits last night?" Qian Yu frowned, its eyes filled with grievance. After a moment of silence, it nodded and said, "Yes, I ate those spirit fruits but what? No buts." Xiang Wuji waved his hand and interrupted it again. Then he shouted at Ji Tianxing angrily, "Bastard, did you hear that? Little fox has admitted its crime. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me for my loss?" Ji Tianxing was in a dilemma. His face was dark and uncertain. Hundreds of thoughts flashed through his mind. However, the situation was not good. Qian Yu had indeed made a mistake. He could not defend himself. In the end, He could only suppress the anger in his heart. He cupped his hands and said to Xueqi, "Senior, those spirit fruits are priceless. I can't pay you back even if I sell my entire fortune. I can only apologize to you on behalf of Chen Yu. You can punish me however you want." Xueqi's eyes flashed with a smile. However, he still shouted angrily, "Humph! At least you know what's good for you. Of course I'm going to punish you. I'm going to punish you severely. Come with me." Then, Xueqi put his hands behind his back and left the courtyard with Chen Yu. Ji Tianxing could only follow and enter the third courtyard of the Graydon Palace. The third courtyard was even more spacious. The courtyard was filled with dust and leaves. There were also weeds that were half the height of a person. Xueqi stood at the entrance of the courtyard. He pointed to the roof of a row of houses in the west and said, "The herbs that are drying on the roof are all ingredients that I use to refine pills. Before the sky turns dark, you have to categorize those dried herbs and put them into the medicine cabinet in the pill room." Hearing his words, Ji Tianxing looked towards the west side of the roof. He saw that the roof of the west side of the row of houses was covered with herbs of different colors. Countless herbs were spread out on the roof. It was 3 meters wide and 30 meters long. It looked like a huge multicolored carpet. Ji Tianxing's expression changed. He looked troubled as he muttered to himself, "There are so many herbs. There must be at least tens of thousands of them. There are still 8 hours before the sky turns dark. How can I complete the task?" Xueqi did not seem to see his expression. He shouted again, "Kid, not only do you have to put the herbs away, you can't make a single mistake. Otherwise, I won't be polite to you." After saying this, Xueqi brought Chen Yu into the main hall. He sat in the armchair and drank tea, closing his eyes to rest. Ji Tianxing smiled bitterly and helplessly. He could only work obediently. He came to the west side of the courtyard and looked up at the roof. He could not help but frown. This row of houses was simple and grand. It was wide and tall. The roof was 5 meters above the ground. With his strength, he could jump onto the roof in one leap. But he had to take care of tens of thousands of herbs. If he jumped up and down tens of thousands of times, how could his body take it? Thus, Ji Tianxing turned to look for a wooden ladder in the room. Xueqi, who was sitting in the main hall drinking tea, shouted without looking up, "You are a true energy realm martial artist. You need to find a ladder to go up to the roof? Don't you feel embarrassed? Also, you don't need to find one. I don't have one in my Great Peace Palace." Ji Tianxing frowned. He felt even more depressed. He could only walk back to the west side of the row of houses and jump onto the roof. But just as he jumped into the air, Xueqi's cold and angry voice came from the main hall. "Kid, be gentler. If you dare to break a single tile, I will hang you up and beat you." Ji Tianxing was in the air. When he heard this, his face turned green with anger. But he did not dare to lose his temper. If he really broke the glazed tiles on the roof, the stinky old man would definitely flip out. He could only take a deep breath and infuse his body with true energy. His body lightly landed on the roof. As a result, the glazed tiles were completely undamaged. He had to maintain the circulation of true energy and walk on the roof like he was using qigong to collect the herbs. Chapter 107. These herbs are blood spirit grass, and those are illusory sun grass. These herbs are evil heart flowers, and they are highly poisonous. I can't touch them with my hands. Ji Tianxing stood on the roof, bent down to identify the herbs, and carefully tidied them up. He had studied the 1,000 medicine collection diligently before, and now he could identify more than 1,000 herbs. Therefore, he was no stranger to the tens of thousands of herbs on the roof. When he had to tidy up the evil heart flowers, he had to tear a piece of cloth from his robe and wrap it up to avoid being poisoned if he touched it with his hands. After a while, he jumped from the roof back to the courtyard with a dozen herbs in his left hand and a dozen evil heart flowers wrapped in cloth in his right hand. The alchemy room was next to the lobby, and it was an extremely spacious and bright room. After Ji Tianxing entered the alchemy room, he saw 3 alchemy furnaces of different sizes in the center of the room. The smallest alchemy furnace was only the size of a wash basin, and it was made of brass and other materials. The largest black alchemy furnace was more than 3 meters tall, and it looked ancient and very mysterious. On the 4 walls of the alchemy room, there were rows of hidden compartments of different sizes, and each compartment was engraved with the name of a herb. There were at least 3,600 hidden compartments on the 4 walls, and they were used to store more than 3,600 kinds of herbs. Obviously, these were the alchemy room's medicine cabinets. Ji Tianqing stared at the countless hidden compartments on the wall, and after searching for a full quarter of an hour, he found the hidden compartment that stored the blood spirit grass, illusory sun grass, and evil heart flowers, and put these 3 herbs in. Then, he walked out of the alchemy room, jumped to the roof on the west side, and bent down to continue identifying the herbs. Although he could recognize most of the herbs, there were a few that he had not seen before. He could only flip through the 1,000 medicine collection and identify the herbs that he did not recognize. Time passed quietly, and the sun in the sky gradually set in the west. After 2 hours, Ji Tianqing had only tidied up more than 400 herbs, and identified more than 50 kinds. At this speed, it would take him at least 3 days to finish tidying up the tens of thousands of herbs on the roof. There was nothing he could do about it. During this period of time, he encountered 2 medicinal herbs that he did not recognize. He could only patiently read through the 1,000 medicine collection to find the answer. At this moment, Xiang Wuji's voice came from the hall again. The old man was clearly getting impatient. "Brat, how long will it take for you to finish cleaning up the herbs if you keep dawdling like this?" Ji Tianqing was also a little anxious and angry. He held a palm-sized dark brown herb and explained to Wuji, "Senior, this junior has already done his best. However, when I encounter herbs that I don't recognize, I can only look at the 1,000 herb collection to identify them. I don't dare to place them randomly." Xiang Wuji sneered and said contemptuously, "You don't even know the 5 lights Ganoderma, and you still have the nerve to say that you've seen the 1,000 medicine collection?" The 5 lights Ganoderma grows on dry rocks facing the sun. It contains earth and fire elemental energy of heaven and earth. It's the main ingredient for refining the wind fire Shen pill and good dust Shen pill. Although Xiang Wuji's tone was unfriendly, he casually mentioned the name of the herb, its growth characteristics and effects. This saved Ji Tianqing a lot of time. He listened carefully to Xiang Wuji's words and memorized the appearance, effects and characteristics of the 5 lights Ganoderma. Following this, his speed of cleaning up the herbs was indeed much faster. Another 2 hours passed. Ji Tianqing had cleaned up another 1,000 herbs and identified more than 70 herbs. However, he quickly encountered more than 10 herbs that he didn't recognize. He wanted to ask Xiang Wuji, but when he thought of Xiang Wuji's bad attitude and tone, he dismissed the idea. He squatted on the roof and flipped through the 1,000 herb collection, trying to find the answer in the book. 15 minutes passed. Ji Tianqing found a herb called the demon spirit flower in the 1,000 herb collection. It was very similar to the herb in his hand. However, after careful identification and comparison, he realized that the herb in his hand wasn't the demon spirit flower. It was just very similar. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to continue flipping through the 1,000 herb collection. Very quickly, an hour passed. He finished flipping through half of the 1,000 herb collection, but still found nothing. At this time, Xiang Wuji's voice rang out in the hall. "Kid, don't waste your time. Even if you turn the 1,000 herb collection upside down, you won't find the answer. The herb in your hand is very precious. It's called the God Flame herb. This herb isn't recorded in the 1,000 herb collection, nor in the spiritual herb garden." Ji Tianqing silently listened. He memorized the appearance of the God Flame herb and what Xiang Wuji said. Unknowingly, 8 hours passed. The sun had set and the sky was dark. Night was about to fall. Ji Tianqing worked hard for 8 hours. In total, he had cleaned up more than 5,000 herbs and identified more than 700 types. However, even with his hard work, he had only completed a third of the task. His heart was a little uneasy. He was secretly guessing how the damned old man would react. After a while, Xiang Wuji brought Chen Yu out of the hall and into the courtyard. He glanced at the herbs on the roof and said calmly, "It's getting dark. You should go back to the storm courtyard. Come back tomorrow and continue working." Ji Tianqing was a little surprised. He didn't expect Xiang Wuji to not be angry. He hesitated and asked, "Senior, the herbs are still on the roof. There will be dew at night. It won't do to soak the herbs." Before he could finish his words, he saw a shocking scene. Xiang Wuji casually waved his hand and sent out an invisible force. It wrapped around the countless herbs on the roof. The 10,000 herbs flew in front of Xiang Wuji and flowed into the black thumb ring on his left hand. In the blink of an eye, Xiang Wuji had collected the 10,000 herbs. The whole process was very easy. To him, it was as simple as eating and drinking. After collecting the herbs, Xiang Wuji turned and left with Qian Yu. Ji Tianxing stared at Xiang Wuji's back in shock. After a long time, he came back to his senses. Ah, that damned old man. He could have collected all the herbs with a wave of his hand, but he made me jump up and down on the roof for the whole afternoon. He's doing this on purpose. Too hateful. Ji Tianxing was very angry and ashamed. He clenched his fists and roared in his heart. A moment later, Xiang Wuji and Qian Yu disappeared into the depths of the palace. Ji Tianxing could only suppress the anger in his heart and leave the Greaten Palace before it got dark. When he returned to the Wind Cloud courtyard, it was already dark. When he returned to his room, he collapsed on the bed to rest. He didn't even want to move a finger. Today in the Greaten Palace, he had been attacked by the old man's sword energy and had almost used up all his true essence. Then he had been punished to collect the herbs on the roof. He had jumped up and down a few hundred times. He was already exhausted. Fortunately, after he ate dinner, he recovered his strength. After eating, he sat at the table and thought about what had happened during the day. Although today in the Greaten Palace, I was miserably messed with by that damned old man. I was so tired that my bones were about to fall apart. But thinking about it carefully, I remembered more than 1,000 herbs today. I also recognized 2 herbs that were not in the 1,000 medicine collection. That damned old man attacked me with his sword energy and forced me to use a light body technique on the roof. It also increased my reaction and speed a lot. I can also use the light body technique more easily. It seems that a difficult situation can train a person. If I had been in secluded cultivation in my room, I wouldn't have been able to achieve this effect. I wouldn't have improved so quickly. Chapter 108. For the next 2 days, Ji Tianxing went to the Grand Peace Palace to work every day. Every day, he would leave early in the morning and only return to the storm courtyard when it was dark. Every day, he would be exhausted. In the first 2 days, Xiang Wuji placed more than 10,000 medicinal herbs on the roof to dry. Ji Tianxing had to organize the dried herbs and place them into the medicine cabinet in the pill room. While he was organizing the herbs on the roof, Xiang Wuji sat in the main hall drinking tea or resting with his eyes closed. Every time he encountered an unknown herb, Xiang Wuji would insult him and then tell him the herb's name, characteristics, and effects. After 2 days of work, Ji Tianxing finally organized more than 10,000 herbs and placed them into the medicine cabinet without any mistakes. During this time, he had clearly identified more than 3,000 herbs in the 1,000 medicine collection and had a deep impression of them. In addition, he also recognized more than 100 special herbs. They were all rare species that didn't exist in the 1,000 medicine collection or the spirit medicine garden. On the 3rd day, Ji Tianxing finally didn't have to organize the herbs anymore. He originally thought that he could finally sweep the floor in peace and no longer be tortured by Xiang Wuji's tricks. However, he didn't think that Xiang Wuji would punish him to take care of the herbs in the medicine garden. The Grand Peace Palace's medicine garden was Xiang Wuji's private medicine garden. Although this medicine garden wasn't as big as the spirit medicine garden in the sky upholding peak, it was still a full kilometer in radius. There were more than 3,600 types of herbs in the medicine garden. In total, there were more than 100,000 stalks. Ji Tianxing's task was to continuously water the herbs, loosen the soil, remove the weeds, and prune the branches and leaves every day. In the beginning, Ji Tianxing refused this tedious and tiring task. He was very unwilling to accept it. However, Xiang Wuji confidently said that his medicine garden was the best in the sky upholding sect and planted with the most precious and rare herbs. Ji Tianxing should feel extremely honored and proud to be able to enter his private medicine garden. Countless genius disciples, deacons, and elders of the sky upholding sect wanted to help him take care of the herbs in his medicine garden, but they didn't have the fortune to do so. Moreover, Ji Tianxing was now a criminal. He had to accept his punishment and work honestly. Only then could his punishment be reduced. Under Xiang Wuji's threats and promises, Ji Tianxing had no choice but to work in the herb garden and take care of the herbs. Every day, he dealt with more than 3,000 kinds of medicinal herbs. He was busy from dawn to nightfall, and only then did he drag his tired body back to the Tempest courtyard. Of course, Ji Tianxing had worked in the medicinal garden for 2 days, and it was still very rewarding. He knew more than 3,000 kinds of herbs like the back of his hand. He didn't need to look at the 1,000 herbs collection at all, and he could casually mention the growth habits and effects of various herbs. Just like that. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. This morning, Ji Tianqing had just finished washing up and was about to head to Great Peace Palace. Suddenly, the bell rang in the main hall of the Fengyun courtyard. Ji Tianqing hurriedly stopped in his tracks. Together with the other disciples of the Tempest Hall, they quickly gathered in the main hall. After a short 100 breaths of time, the 10 disciples of the Tempest Hall were all present. Han Qiuxing and Du Wu walked into the main hall and sat at the head of the table. Han Qiuxing glanced at the 10 disciples in the main hall. With a solemn expression he said, "Everyone, 7 days have passed. I believe that after 7 days of study, you have all memorized the 1,000 Herbs collection by heart. You all have a clear understanding of the contents of the book." The disciples didn't open their mouths to speak, but most of them revealed confident smiles. They had a posture of having a card up their sleeve. Han Qiuxing saw everyone's reaction and nodded his head in satisfaction. He then continued, "Today, I want to test you all. Have you studied diligently in the past 7 days? The one with the best performance will be rewarded with a special overflowing origin pill." Hearing the 3 words overflowing origin pill, the disciples were stunned for a moment. Their faces were filled with pleasant surprise and excitement. The reward is actually a overflowing origin pill? That's great! I've long heard of the miraculous effects of the overflowing origin pill. This is a profound level high-grade pill. After taking it, it can greatly enhance one's cultivation. It's equivalent to a year of our bitter cultivation. Deacon Han is really generous. It's just a small test, but he's actually willing to take out such a miraculous profound level pill. I must obtain the overflowing origin pill. If I can take a overflowing origin pill, I'll definitely be able to reach the profound understanding realm within half a year. Several disciples were discussing in low voices. Their faces were filled with excitement and anticipation. Especially Shi Jingqing and Emo. They were determined to obtain the overflowing origin pill. The 2 of them didn't put the other disciples in their eyes. They only regarded each other as competitors. Their eyes were filled with hostility. At this time, Han Qiuxing took out a palm-sized black cloth bag from his sleeve and placed it on the table. He stretched out his hand and touched the black cloth bag. Out of thin air, he took out a dark green herb. "Everyone, do you know what kind of herb this is?" Ji Tianqing and the other disciples immediately stared at the herb and carefully observed it. The herb was as long as a chopstick. It had a cluster of white roots and 6 leaves. It was dark green all over and emitted a faint spiritual qi. Everyone instantly recognized the herb and said in unison, "This is the spirit void herb." Han Qiuxing nodded and looked at Nie Hao. "Nie Hao, tell us about the characteristics and effects of this spirit void herb." Nie Hao said calmly, "The spirit void herb is commonly seen in swamps filled with miasma. It needs to grow for 8 years to mature." After he finished speaking in an orderly manner, Han Qiuxing revealed a satisfied smile. He put the spirit void grass back into the black cloth bag, and then took out a half-meter-long dark brown herb from the bag. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately understood that Han Qiuxing's black cloth bag was the same as his 100 treasures brocade pouch. They were both storage treasures with space inside. Han Qiuxing held the herb and asked calmly, "Everyone, do you know what kind of herb this is?" This time, everyone frowned and carefully observed for a moment before someone answered one after another. "This is the yellow tooth whisker." "Yes, this is the yellow tooth whisker." Han Qiuxing called out Ji Ling's name and let Ji Ling explain the characteristics and effects of the yellow tooth whisker. Ji Ling revealed a confident smile and said in a confident tone, "The yellow tooth whisker usually grows in the yellow soil halfway up the mountain. There will be poisonous snakes guarding within 3 meters of it." After he finished speaking, Han Qiuxing took out a few more herbs for everyone to identify. Each herb was more rare than the last. The time the disciples had to observe and think became longer and longer. When it came to the last herb, everyone observed it for half an hour but no one dared to say with certainty. Only Ji Tianqing had an answer in his heart after observing for 100 breaths. He just kept his mouth shut. Han Qiuxing frowned and said in a serious tone, "What? What have you been doing these 7 days? Don't tell me you can't even recognize this herb?" Shi Jingqing, Emo, and Ji Ling were originally hesitant. After hearing Han Qiuxing's words, the 3 immediately answered and said in unison, "Deacon Han, this is the spirit sealing orchid." The other disciples also chimed in, saying that the herb was the spirit-sealing orchid and that it was recorded in the collection of 1,000 herbs. Only Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. The corner of his mouth even hooked up in a playful smile. Han Qiusheng saw his expression and called out his name. Ji Tianqing, tell me, what is the name of this herb? What are its characteristics and effects? Chapter 109. Hearing this, the disciples all revealed gloating smiles. Shi Jingqing and Ji Ling even laughed and teased Ji Tianqing. Deacon Han, did you forget? Ji Tianqing was punished by you to sweep the floor. These 7 days, he woke up early and worked late every day to clean. That's right. Deacon Han, Ji Tianqing definitely can't answer your question. His mind must be filled with sweeping and weeding right now. Ji Tianqing glanced at Ji Ling and Shi Jingqing with a cold expression. A hint of contempt flashed in his eyes. Then he turned to look at Han Qiusheng and said calmly, Deacon Han, this herb isn't spirit-sealing orchid, but return to Heaven Imperial Court. Hearing Ji Tianqing's answer, before Han Qiusheng could say anything, the disciples all frowned. Return to Heaven Imperial Court? It's clearly spirit-sealing orchid. Is he blind? What kind of lousy name is this? I've never heard of it. I've memorized all 3,520 herbs recorded in the 1,000 medicine collection. There's definitely no herb called Return to Heaven Imperial Court. Hee, looks like Ji Tianqing's brain was muddled from sweeping and made up a name, right? Look at his serious appearance. If I wasn't familiar with the 1,000 medicine collection, I would have been fooled by him. Just wait and see. He dares to fool Deacon Han like this. He won't have a good ending. Shi Jingqing, EMO, and Ji Ling secretly sneered. They looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes full of ridicule and pity. Han Qiusheng still looked at Ji Tianqing with a calm expression and asked again. Ji Tianqing, everyone knows this herb and believes that it's spirit-sealing orchid. Are you sure this is Return to Heaven Imperial Court? Have you carefully observed it? I hope you think carefully before answering. Ji Tianqing ignored everyone's sneers and nodded firmly. Deacon Han, this disciple is sure that this is Return to Heaven Imperial Court. Good. Then tell us about its characteristics and effects. Han Qiusheng's eyes flashed with an inexplicable smile. Ji Tianqing said with a normal expression, Return to Heaven Imperial Court usually grows on mountain peaks above 3,000 meters. It's covered by snow and white clouds. It has the effect of refining the soul and promoting spiritual sense. Although its appearance is very similar to spirit-sealing orchid, even many alchemy masters would mistake it if they didn't look carefully, it is indeed different from spirit-sealing orchid. The roots of the spirit-sealing orchid are milky white and grow outwards, while the roots of the heaven-returning palace are snow white and converge inwards. Han Qiusheng quietly, he listened to Ji Tianqing's narration. The expressions of Shi Jingqing, EMO, Ji Ling, and the other disciples changed drastically. In the beginning, everyone was sure that Ji Tianqing was talking nonsense, and they all looked like they were waiting to see a good show. But when they heard Ji Tianqing speak with assurance and reason, the sneers on their faces disappeared. When they heard the last part, everyone looked at each other in dismay. Their eyes were filled with shock and doubt. No way? How can this guy talk nonsense so clearly and logically? It shouldn't be. That's clearly spirit-sealing orchid. What Return to Heaven Imperial Court? It's not recorded in the 1,000 medicine collection. This kid can't be telling the truth, right? Don't worry, Deacon Han hasn't announced the results yet. What bullshit Return to Heaven Imperial Court? It's not recorded in the 1,000 medicine collection at all. Why would Deacon Han use this to test us? Everyone whispered to each other, feeling a little uneasy. Finally, Ji Tianqing's Return to Heaven Imperial Court and spirit-sealing orchid was calm and confident. The hall fell silent. Han Qiusheng put down the herbs in his hand and actually stood up. He looked down at Ji Tianqing with a gratified smile on his face and actually clapped his hands. Good. Very good. Very good. Han Qiusheng said 3 words in a row, which made Shi Jingqing, EMO, Ji Ling, and the others dumbfounded on the spot. They were completely stunned. Several disciples' faces changed as they stared at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. Han Qiusheng's voice was as loud as a bell as he said, Ji Tianqing, what you said is completely correct. You even said what I wanted to say without missing a single word. You're very diligent. This origin pill is the reward you deserve. After that, he took out a dark red pill from the black cloth bag and flicked it to Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing took the origin pill with a smile and bowed to Han Qiusheng. "Thank you, Deacon Han." Han Qiusheng waved his hand with a smile and said, "Don't thank me. You earned this with your own efforts and knowledge." After that, he looked at Shi Jingqing, EMO, and the others with a solemn expression and said in a deep voice, "Although I asked you to learn the 1,000 medicine collection, you can all recite it backwards. But people who only know how to memorize, don't observe and learn, and can't draw inferences from one case, don't deserve to be called geniuses. I asked you to learn how to identify herbs. Did you only look at the 1,000 medicine collection? Don't you know to look at more ancient books on herbs? In the future, when you roam the world and meet enemies who use martial skills you've never seen before, are you going to sit and wait for death? If you don't even understand this principle, then why do you cultivate martial arts? Go home, farm, and have children as soon as possible." All the disciples were reprimanded so harshly by Han Qiusheng that they all looked ashamed and lowered their heads, not daring to look at Han Qiusheng. Shi Jingqing, EMO, and Ji Ling, on the other hand, were the ones who had been jumping around the most and mocking Ji Tianxing. Now, however, their expressions were the ugliest. Among the 10 disciples, Shi Jingqing and EMO were the most confident. However, both of them recognized the wrong herb and even swore that it was the spirit-sealing orchid. In the end, Ji Tianxing, who was mocked by them, recognized the returning heaven imperial and pointed out the difference between this herb and the spirit-sealing orchid. To Shi Jingqing and EMO, who boasted that they were proficient in alchemy, this was the greatest insult. Both of them clenched their fists as the flames of anger and humiliation surged in their hearts. They hated Ji Tianxing so much that they gnashed their teeth. If Ji Tianxing didn't give the answer and show off in front of everyone, they wouldn't have been reprimanded by Deacon Han like this. Therefore, the two of them naturally had to blame this on Ji Tianxing. After Han Qiusheng reprimanded all the disciples, he opened his mouth and announced, "In the following week, everyone's task is to learn how to concoct herbs and how to match pill formulas and herbs." Du Wu hurriedly walked into the main hall and took out 10 ancient books as thick as bricks and distributed them to everyone. On the cover of that black ancient book, there were 3 large words, 1,000 Directions Gathering, written on it. Han Qiusheng said in a deep voice, "In this week, everyone can refer to the 1,000 Directions Gathering to learn. A week later, this seat will assess again." Saying that, he brought Du Wu and left the main hall. All the disciples held on to the 1,000 Directions Gathering, but their hearts were filled with mixed feelings. Shi Jingqing and EMO in particular were glaring coldly at Ji Tianxing, as if they were burning with rage. Seeing Ji Tianxing about to turn and leave the main hall, Shi Jingqing walked up with a black face and blocked his path. "Ji Tianxing, don't think that you can hold your head high just because you guessed a herb correctly and received Deacon Han's reward. So what if you know how to identify herbs? Wait until the end of the month assessment and you'll have to start refining pills. At that time, I'll definitely trample you under my feet." EMO also walked in front of him, his face filled with anger as he coldly shouted, "Ji Tianxing, don't be complacent. The future is long. You little thief who stole the spirit fruit, sooner or later you'll be kicked out of the storm courtyard." Ji Tianxing was in a good mood and was in a hurry to rush back to his room to take the Chaoyuan pill and improve his cultivation. Shi Jingqing and EMO suddenly showed up and scolded him without giving him any chance to explain. His face suddenly became gloomy. His eyes coldly glanced at the two and sneered, "Haha, I have no enmity with the two of you, but you're insulting me for no reason. Were the two of you bitten by a mad dog when you were young and contracted the mad dog disease, so you bite everyone you see?" Chapter 110. Shi Jingqing and EMO were so angry that their lungs were about to explode. They stared at Ji Tianxing with livid faces. "Ji Tianxing, how dare you insult me? You damn bastard. I'm going to teach you a lesson." Both of them were bursting with anger and fighting spirit. They clenched their fists and were about to teach Ji Tianxing a lesson. Ji Tianxing was not afraid at all. He sneered, "Haha, a mad dog is indeed a mad dog. You're angry out of shame and you want to fight?" Shi Jingqing and EMO could no longer hold back their anger. They waved their fists and smashed at Ji Tianxing. "Ji Tianxing, you're courting death. Bastard, get down on the ground." They besieged Ji Tianxing from both sides. Their fists were shining with the light of true essence, blowing a violent wind. Ji Tianxing's figure flashed and dodged Shi Jingqing's attack. He was about to use his palm to meet Emo's fist. At this moment, Nye Hao suddenly appeared beside him. With a deep shout, he threw a punch at Emo. Their fists collided with each other, making a muffled sound and exploding violent chi. Nye Hao stood still and did not step back. Emo, however, was pushed back 3 steps. 2 against 1? What kind of man are you? Fight me one-on-one if you have the guts. Nye Hao stared at Emo indifferently. His whole body was surging with a strong fighting spirit. Emo frowned and looked at him. A hint of fear flashed through his eyes. He shouted angrily, "Nye Hao, it's none of your business. Get out of my way." Xueqi also stared at Nye Hao angrily. He sneered, "Nye Hao, you're meddling in other people's business. Do you want to be our enemy?" Nye Hao did not care about their threats at all. He waved his fist with a sneer. "Ji Tianxing is my friend. If you want to bully him, ask my fist first." "Nye Hao, let's wait and see." Xueqi and Emo were furious. They glared at Nye Hao and left the hall unwillingly. Ji Tianxing's eyes flashed with a cold light as he watched the two leave. He turned his head to look at Nye Hao and nodded with a smile. "Nye Hao, thank you for your help." Nye Hao smiled and waved his hand. "Brother Ji doesn't need to thank me. In fact, with Brother Ji's strength, even if I didn't make a move, the two of them wouldn't be able to do anything to you." Ji Tianxing only smiled faintly and declined to comment. The two exchanged a few pleasantries before they left the conference hall and returned to their respective rooms. After returning to his room, Ji Tianxing entered the secret chamber and took out the Chao Yuan pill to examine it carefully. This dark red Shen core contained surging Yuan Qi and emitted a bright red light. This pill was refined by the Sky Pillar Sect's alchemists. It was absolutely impossible to buy it in a mundane kingdom. Its effects were extremely powerful, and consuming one pill could increase one's cultivation by a year. Of course, the effects of the Chao Yuan pill would be the best the first time. After that, the effects would be greatly reduced. If one consumed more than 4 Chao Yuan pills, they would completely lose their effects. Ji Tianxing held the Chao Yuan pill in his hand and thought to himself, "I didn't expect Administrator Han to take out the returning Heaven Imperial Court, which isn't recorded in the 1,000 medicine collection, to test everyone. Fortunately, when I helped the stinky old man collect the herbs, I recognized many herbs that aren't in the 1,000 medicine collection. Otherwise, I would have been stumped just now and wouldn't have been able to obtain this Chao Yuan pill. It seems that although I worked very hard in the Great Peace Palace, I was able to learn a lot of things." Thinking about it this way, Ji Tianxing felt that the suffering he had gone through in the Great Peace Palace was worth it. He finally had his reward. After collecting his thoughts, he consumed the Chao Yuan pill and began to circulate his energy to refine the medicinal effects. When the Chao Yuan pill entered his stomach, it was catalyzed by his true essence and immediately emitted surging heat waves that surged through his limbs and bones. Ji Tianxing hurriedly circulated his energy and guided the medicinal effects into his meridians. They turned into majestic true essence and gathered in the sword embryo. Time passed quietly, and his power was also increasing rapidly. Unknowingly, an entire day had passed. Ji Tianxing finally completely refined the Chao Yuan pill. His cultivation had increased by about 4 times, and the sword embryo in his body had also doubled in size. The powerful effects of the Chao Yuan pill allowed his strength to reach the 6th level of the true essence realm. Ji Tianxing finished his cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. Only then did he realize that it was already the morning of the next day. The morning sun had just risen. The faint morning light scattered over the storm courtyard, reflecting the dew on the flowers and leaves, refracting a dazzling brilliance. Yesterday, I was cultivating in the secret chamber and didn't go to the Great Peace Palace for the entire day. The stinky old man is definitely going to flip out. Ji Tianxing frowned and hurriedly left the storm courtyard. He brought the 1,000 Directions village and hurried to the Great Peace Palace. An hour later, he walked more than 10 miles and finally arrived at the Great Peace Palace. The middle-aged mute guarding the entrance of the Great Peace Palace already knew him after a week. After seeing Ji Tianxing, the middle-aged mute nodded his head in greeting and squeezed out a stiff smile. However, the middle-aged mute's face was full of scars from sabers and swords. His eyes were fierce and full of killing intent. That stiff smile of his looked very frightening. Ji Tianxing cupped his hands in greeting and hurriedly stepped through the door into the Great Peace Palace. After entering the 3rd courtyard, he picked up the broom and bamboo basket and obediently cleaned the courtyard. While cleaning, He didn't forget to flip through the Thousand Directions village and study the contents of the book. Fortunately, an entire morning had passed and Xiang Wuji still hadn't appeared. In the afternoon, it was the hottest time of the day. Ji Tianqing threw down the broom and bamboo basket and sat in the shade under the eaves to rest. He focused on reading the book. Just as he was engrossed in reading, light footsteps suddenly came from the courtyard entrance. There was also a young girl's voice calling out, "Grandmaster, I've come to visit you." The young girl's voice was very pleasant and her tone was gentle and pleasant. Most importantly, Ji Tianqing felt that this voice was somewhat familiar. He hurriedly put away the Thousand Directions village and raised his head to look at the courtyard entrance. He saw a young girl about 16 or 17 years old, wearing a long green dress, walking into the courtyard with a box of food. That young girl had a graceful figure and a pure and beautiful face. Under her neat bangs were a pair of large watery eyes. Her bright eyes and white teeth were very pleasant. She walked into the courtyard with the box of food. Her steps were light and graceful, and she had an innate gentle and demure temperament. When Ji Tianqing saw her clearly, he was stunned. "Junior sister Xian? Why are you here?" Clearly, that young girl in the green dress was Xian. When she saw Ji Tianqing sitting under the eaves, she also revealed a puzzled and surprised expression. "Tianqing? I've come to visit Grandmaster. Why are you here?" As she spoke, she glanced at the broom and bamboo basket beside Ji Tianqing. Seeing that the bamboo basket was filled with fallen leaves, weeds, and dust, she instantly understood. "Tianqing, you're here to help Grandmaster clean the courtyard? You're really considerate." Ji Tianqing smiled awkwardly and was about to explain. At this moment, Xiang Wuji's voice suddenly came from behind him. "Little Xian, do you think this kid is so diligent to help me sweep the floor? He's here because he made a mistake." Chapter 111. As he spoke, Xiang Wuji walked out of one of the rooms. He was still wearing his long purple robes. His snow-white hair and beard were stained with bits of medicinal herbs and powder. Even though he was not polite to Ji Tianqing, his gaze when he looked at Xian was full of affection. His wrinkled face was full of smiles. Being punished to sweep the floor? Xian looked with surprise at Ji Tianqing. She wanted to laugh when she saw Ji Tianqing's gloomy expression, but she held it in. She walked under the eaves with the food box and bowed to Xiang Wuji. She said with a slight smile, "Grandmaster, this is the dessert that Xian personally made for you. Please try it." Xiang Wuji smiled even more happily. He hurriedly took the food box and said with a gratified expression, "Of the juniors in the sect, little Xian is the most sensible. Not only do you often come to visit this old man, you also bring gifts for this old man. This old man likes to eat the desserts that little Xian makes." Xian gave a faint smile and hurriedly explained, "Grandmaster, it is not that the Xixiang and Shiji are not willing to visit you. It is that you do not allow them to come to Greaton Palace to avoid disturbing your peace." Xiang Wuji's smile disappeared and he frowned. He said exasperatedly, "Humph. Those little brats say they are coming to visit this old man. Which one of them is not thinking about this old man's spirit medicines and treasures? All of them pretend to be gentlemen. Do you think they can hide their intentions from this old man? They are so young yet they do not cultivate and always want to take shortcuts. This old man scolding them is already light." Xian explained with a slight smile and this caused Xiang Wuji's anger to dissipate. Then Xiang Wuji took the food box and turned to enter the room. Xian did not follow him into the room. She sat on the stone bench under the eaves and asked Ji Tianqing with a slight smile. "Tianqing, you have just entered the sect a few days ago. How did you make a mistake and be punished to sweep Greaton Palace? Is it because you do not understand the rules of the sect and committed some taboo?" Ji Tianqing looked at her clear eyes and could feel her worry and concern. He had no doubt that if he told her that he had been framed, Xian would be even more worried. Thinking of this, he did not explain anything. He only nodded and said, "Yes, after all, I'm new here. But now, I know what I'm doing. I won't do it again." "Yes, I believe you." Xian smiled and nodded. She saw the Thousand Directions set in Ji Tianqing's hands and asked, "Did Attendant Han ask you to learn pill recipes and concoct medicine again?" "That's right," Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "I have to learn how to concoct medicine this week and take the alchemy assessment at the end of the month." Xian's beautiful eyes turned. she said with a slight smile. You have to clean Grayton Palace and learn the 1,000 directions set at the same time. I'm afraid you will not be able to do it. If you have any questions, you can ask me. I can help you answer them. I learned all this back then. Ji Tianqing smiled and cupped his hands. If that's the case, then I'll have to thank junior apprentice sister Xian Xian. It's nothing. Xian Xian nodded and smiled gently. At this time, Xiang Wuji walked out of the room and came to Xian Xian's side. Little Xian Xian, come and let Grandmaster take a look at your illness. How is your recovery? Xian Xian nodded obediently and stretched out her right hand. Xiang Wuji stretched out 2 fingers and placed them on her wrist, helping her check her pulse. Ji Tianqing stood to the side and watched silently. His heart was complicated and many thoughts flashed through his mind. Junior apprentice sister Xian Xian looks so gentle and kind. How can she be ill? Her body is unwell and she is ill, but she still cares for me so much. After a while, Xiang Wuji retracted his fingers and a gratified smile appeared on his face. Yes, not bad. In this half a month, little Xian Xian, you have more or less recovered. The extreme cold poison has also been completely removed. I really didn't expect that this old man's herb garden would have so many spirit herbs and miraculous medicines, but none of them could cure your illness. However, the red starflower is compatible with your natal attribute. It can remove the extreme cold poison in your body and prevent you from being tortured by it in the future. Hearing Xiang Wuji's words, Ji Tianqing's expression changed and a flash of light flashed across his eyes. Many thoughts flashed through his mind and he finally understood. So, junior apprentice sister Xian Xian's illness is due to the extreme cold poison in her body, and the red starflower can help her get rid of it. This means that when Yun Yao obtained the red starflower stamen, she used it to treat junior apprentice sister Xian Xian's illness. Both Xian Xian and I have consumed the red starflower and our bodies have been transformed by the red starflower's medicinal power. No wonder when I first met her, I felt an inexplicable sense of closeness. So, the 2 of us are fated to be together. Ji Tianqing finally understood the reason. He also vaguely guessed that Xian Xian and Yun Yao must have a close relationship. After checking on Xian Xian's condition, Xiang Wuji gave a few more instructions and turned around to get busy in the alchemy room. He originally wanted Xian Xian to go to the alchemy room with him and help him look after the alchemy furnace and learn alchemy at the same time. However, Xian Xian found an excuse to reject him. After Xiang Wuji left, Xian Xian stayed in the courtyard to accompany Ji Tianqing and help him explain the contents of the 1,000 Directions book. With Xian Xian's help, Ji Tianqing did not need to flip through the 1,000 Directions book and saved a lot of time. As he cleaned the courtyard, he listened to Xian Xian's explanation of alchemy and learned more deeply and thoroughly. He was also in a good mood. Unknowingly, an afternoon passed. After the sun set, Ji Tianqing and Xian Xian walked out of the Grayton Palace side by side and were about to return to their respective residences. However, just as the 2 of them reached the entrance of the Grayton Palace, they were stopped by a handsome young man in a white robe. This handsome young man was Lu Mingyang, who had just entered the inner sect. Lu Mingyang held a sandalwood box in his hands and it was obvious that he had been waiting outside for a long time. When he saw Xian Xian walk out of the door, he immediately welcomed her with a face full of smiles. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw Ji Tianqing, who was beside Xian Xian. Seeing Ji Tianqing and Xian Xian talking and laughing as they walked side by side, the smile on his face instantly froze and his eyes turned gloomy. At this time, Ji Tianqing and Xian Xian also saw Lu Mingyang and stopped in their tracks. The 2 of them did not speak as they calmly looked at Lu Mingyang. Lu Mingyang retracted the coldness in his eyes and hurriedly revealed a gentle smile as he said to Xian Xian, "Xian Xian, I knew that you came to the Grayton Palace today and specially came here to wait for you. This is the 1,000 years fire jade that I spent a lot of time and effort to collect. Even if it cannot help you get rid of the cold poison, it can help you reduce your pain. Xian Xian, this is my kind intentions, you must accept it." Lu Mingyang fawned over Xian Xian and his tone and expression showed that he was extremely concerned. However, Xian Xian was indifferent to his words. After Lu Mingyang finished speaking, she then calmly said, "Take it back, I will not accept your gift. Moreover, the cold poison in my body has already been removed. You don't have to worry about it." Saying this, she turned her head to look at Ji Tianqing and smiled as she said goodbye and quickly left. Chapter 112. Xian Xian's cold attitude made the smile on Lu Mingyang's face freeze. He looked at Xian Xian's back as she left, and the expression on his face slowly turned cold. Recalling Ji Tianqing and Xian Xian walking side by side, talking and laughing, the anger in his heart burned even more. When Xian Xian's back disappeared at the end of the tree-lined path, Lu Mingyang suddenly turned around and glared at Ji Tianqing coldly. Ji Tianqing, how do you know Xian Xian? And you're so close to her. His expression and eyes were very gloomy, and his tone was cold and angry. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "What? We're all from the same sect. Isn't it normal for us to know each other?" "Normal my ass." Lu Mingyang's face was livid, and he completely tore off his gentle and refined disguise, and cursed in anger. "I think you have ulterior motives, and purposely got close to Xian Xian." As he spoke, he took 2 steps forward in front of Ji Tianqing, and shouted with a ferocious face. "Ji Tianqing, I'm warning you, stay away from Xian Xian in the future. You're just a trash from a broken country, you don't have the qualifications to get close to Xian Xian. You don't even have the qualifications to stand beside her. If you dare to pester Xian Xian in the future, I won't be polite to you." Lu Mingyang's tone was incomparably arrogant, and he clenched his fists, almost unable to suppress the anger in his heart. But Ji Tianqing still looked at him indifferently, and only after he finished speaking did he reveal a contemptuous sneer. "Lu Mingyang, whether I have the qualifications to be friends with Xian Xian, it has nothing to do with you. So what if you're the prince of Chongfeng country? Xian Xian and I hit it off at first sight, and we talk happily, but she doesn't care about you. Even if you try your best to please Xian Xian, but she doesn't have any good feelings for you. In her eyes, you're no different from the dirt and weeds on the roadside. Only a shameless fellow like you would be so thick-skinned and shameless as to pester her. Can't you tell that Xian Xian hates you? You're already an adult. How can you be so shameless? Don't you know what shame is?" Listening to Ji Tianqing's words that didn't contain a single curse word, yet every single word was heart-wrenching, Lu Mingyang was immediately enraged, and his eyes were bloodshot. "Ah, Ji Tianqing, you're fucking courting death." Lu Mingyang could no longer hold back his anger. With a roar, he waved his fists and smashed them toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing sneered contemptuously and immediately retreated. However, Lu Mingyang was a LV1 Tongxian realm martial artist after all. His fists were surging with crimson fire true yuan, bursting with a violent force. Ji Tianqing's retreating speed slowed down a bit, and his chest was swept by the fist's qi, and a large part of his robe was scorched by the flame true essence. If his speed was any slower, he would have been injured by Lu Mingyang on the spot. "Ji Tianqing, today, I'm going to break your legs." Lu Mingyang sneered with a ferocious face, and once again threw his fists at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's face was solemn, and a cold light surged in his eyes. Even though he had reached LV6 True Energy Realm, without the Black Dragon Sword, he was still no match for Lu Mingyang. At this critical moment, he could only use his trump card and activate the sword qi in his body. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 6 streaks of dark golden sword qi flew out from his palms, and instantly split into 12 streaks. They circled around his body and formed a sword net. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. The dense golden sword qi and sword light enveloped a 3-meter radius around him, making a sharp piercing sound. Lu Mingyang's fist smashed into the sword net, and the crimson fire true yuan blasted a large hole in the sword net, and several streaks of sword qi were sent flying. Those dark golden sword qi pierced Lu Mingyang's fists, but were unable to hurt him. "Ha ha ha ha. Little bastard. Continue to be arrogant? Now do you know the difference between true energy realm and mystic realm? If you know what's good for you, kneel down and beg for mercy." Lu Mingyang swung his fists at the sword net, and sneered at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's face was as cold as ice. He clenched his teeth and silently controlled the sword net to block Lu Mingyang's fierce attacks. Bang bang bang. A series of muffled noises burst out one after another as Lu Mingyang blasted out large holes in the sword net of flowing light. Ji Tianqing was forced to retreat, and his face was getting paler and paler. Finally, after 36 consecutive punches, Lu Mingyang roared and used his ultimate move. Raging Flame Fist. Dazzling flames surged out of his body, and he gathered all his power on his fists, forming 2 balls of crimson fire, and punched towards Ji Tianqing. With a muffled bang, the sword net was shattered by the 2 balls of scarlet flames. Ji Tianqing did not have time to dodge, and was about to be hit by the 2 balls of crimson fire. At this critical moment, a dark green sword aura flew out from Grayton Palace, and quickly arrived between the two of them. Phew! That 2-meter-long green sword aura carried a terrifying power, and instantly hit Lu Mingyang's fists. Ji Tianxing only saw a green light flash in front of his eyes, and heard a bang sound. Then he saw Lu Mingyang being sent flying. Lu Mingyang drew an arc in the air, and fell into the forest 5 meters away. He rolled a few times before coming to a stop. He struggled a few times before crawling out of the forest. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, his hair was messy, and his white robe was stained with mud. He looked very pathetic. He looked at Grayton Palace with fear, and then staggered away. But before he left, he glared at Ji Tianxing with hatred. He clearly remembered this grudge, and would definitely find a chance to take revenge in the future. Ji Tianxing looked at Lu Mingyang's retreating figure. His face darkened, and he secretly clenched his fists. He knew very well that if the stinky old man had not saved him at the critical moment, he would have been injured by Lu Mingyang. At this moment, his heart was filled with a strong desire to become stronger. No matter what, he had to increase his strength and reach the mystic comprehending state as soon as possible. Swoosh! A green light flashed, and Xiang Wuji suddenly flew out from Grayton Palace, and landed beside Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing came to his senses, and hurriedly bowed. He said sincerely, "Thank you for saving me, senior." Xiang Wuji did not reply. He glared at him angrily, and scolded, "You little bastard, you are really stupid. You are infuriating me. Such a miraculous sword chi, but you used it so crudely. What a waste of such a great talent. And your family's sword art, called the 10 Mystery Sword Art, don't use it in the future." Ji Tianxing looked at Xiang Wuji innocently. He didn't know why this old man was looking at him with such disappointment. "What are you looking at?" Xiang Wuji glared at him again, and scolded, "Don't go back to the Wind Cloud Courtyard tonight. Come with me, I will teach you 2 sword arts." Begging for recommendation tickets, begging to be added to the bookshelf. Please everyone. Chapter 113. Stupid old man wants to teach me swordsmanship? Ji Tianxing was stunned. He could not believe it. Xiang Wuji had always been strict with him. He would scold him if he did not get his way. If Xiang Wuji could talk to him nicely, he would be thanking the heavens. He did not expect that Xiang Wuji would take the initiative to teach him swordsmanship. Although he was not sure of Xiang Wuji's identity, he had seen Xiang Wuji's moves. They were truly mysterious and unheard of. How could he not be surprised and excited that such a mysterious expert was going to teach him swordsmanship? "What are you waiting for? Come in quickly." Xiang Wuji walked into Great Peace Palace with his hands behind his back and shouted impatiently. Ji Tianxing regained his senses and hurried into the Great Peace Palace. He followed Xiang Wuji into the 3rd courtyard. The sky was already dark and night was about to fall. Xiang Wuji stood in the middle of the courtyard. His feet stepped on the limestone floor and he exuded a mysterious and powerful aura. "Kid, I am going to teach you the Flying Star Sword technique. This sword technique has a total of 9 moves. When practiced to the extreme, it has the power to split the sky and split the earth." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing's eyes lit up, revealing a look of anticipation. "Senior, have you practiced this sword chi before? Is the Flying Star Sword technique also a sword technique to control sword chi?" Xiang Wuji glanced at him and said in a low voice, "Of course, I did not have the opportunity to practice the sword chi in your body. Otherwise, I would have broken through the shackles and entered a higher realm. The Flying Star Sword technique that I am going to teach you is a sword technique that I created in 20 years. It is used to control sword radiance. Although only Primal Core Realm experts can practice and use the Flying Star Sword technique, your sword chi is very special. However, your sword chi is very special, so you can also cultivate this sword technique." After hearing his explanation, Ji Tianxing was enlightened. He nodded to show that he understood. He thought to himself, "It seems that the stupid old man has heard of the way of the sword that I practice. He just did not have the opportunity to practice it. My Tao of the Sword Heart is even more miraculous than ordinary martial arts. With my strength at the true energy stage, I can actually cultivate a Yuan Dan stage sword technique. If I can master the Flying Star Sword Art, I will definitely be stronger than an ordinary martial artist using the Flying Star Sword Art." At this moment, Xiang Wuji said seriously, "Kid, I'll teach you the first 2 moves of the Flying Star Sword technique tonight. As for the remaining 7 moves, it will depend on your comprehension ability before I decide whether to teach them to you. You have to open your eyes wide and watch carefully. This old man will only display it once. Whether or not you can master it will depend on your talent and comprehension ability. Ji Tianqing immediately restrained his thoughts and did not dare to think about it anymore. He stared at Xiang Wuji with his eyes wide open, afraid that he would miss some moves in the dark. Xiang Wuji stood there with a serious expression for a moment. He secretly activated the true yuan in his body and prepared to practice the Flying Star Sword art. An incomparably majestic true essence rushed through his body, and it actually emitted a thunderous rumbling sound. Obviously, its power was extremely terrifying. Brat, watch carefully. First move, Thousand Feather Blade. Xiang Wuji suddenly roared and waved his hands, sending out 3 dark green sword lights. As his hands danced, he formed a sword seal and drew a mysterious arc in the air, and the 3 green sword lights also danced in the air. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 3 streaks of green sword light dispersed and launched an incomparably swift and fierce attack from different angles and directions. Although the 3 sword lights danced within 10 meters of him, each sword light's attack path and trajectory were different, leaving behind a trail of green light in the night. As Xiang Wuji's hands moved, the 3 sword lights attacked continuously in mid-air at the speed of lightning. All of a sudden, with Xiang Wuji as the center, a radius of 10 meters was illuminated by the dazzling sword aura, filled with crisscrossing green flowing light. In just 5 breaths, the 3 sword lights attacked from different angles and directions over 1,000 times. Ji Tianqing's eyes widened in shock, and his heart raced. He felt that this was unbelievable. In 5 breaths, the 3 sword lights attacked over 1,000 times. No wonder this move is called Thousand Feather Blade. No matter how strong the opponent is, he can't block over 1,000 attacks in 5 breaths. He will definitely be shredded into pieces by the sword lights. The power of this Thousand Feather Blade is too terrifying. The Flying Star Sword art is indeed powerful. At the same time, Xiang Wuji finished practicing the Thousand Feather Blade. The 3 green sword lights flew back to him and quietly floated in the air. Xiang Wuji turned to Ji Tianqing and shouted, "Brat, did you see it clearly? I will give you 100 breaths to remember and analyze." Ji Tianqing didn't speak. He closed his eyes and silently recalled. Every movement and detail of Xiang Wuji's Thousand Feather Blade appeared in his mind one by one. After a full 100 breaths, over 1,000 images appeared in his mind, and he finally remembered all the details of the Thousand Feather Blade. Just as he opened his eyes and was about to speak, Xiang Wuji growled again. "Brat, look carefully. The second move, Wind and Thunder Strike." Xiang Wuji waved his hands again. His index and middle fingers closed together to form a sword technique. He drew a mysterious path in front of him. The 3 green sword lights in front of him suddenly turned into 2 and became even bigger. They were at least 2 meters long. Swoosh, swoosh. The 2 huge sword auras flew out 10 meters away and slashed at the ground from mid-air, erupting with an incomparably terrifying power. At that moment, the 2 sword lights shone brightly and created a violent hurricane. The entire yard was filled with sand and pebbles. Boom! A deafening noise. The blinding light and the hurricane blended together. Like a shocking thunder, the sword lights slammed into the green stone floor. Instantly, a 3-meter-wide crater appeared on the blue stone floor, with gravel and dust flying everywhere. The terrifying power traveled into the ground and caused the entire yard to shake violently. It was as if there was an earthquake. In the blink of an eye, the 2 green sword lights flew back to Xiang Wuji and disappeared into his palms. He had finished practicing the second move, Wind and Thunder Strike. Even though this move was simpler and more violent than the Thousand Feather Blade, its power was even more terrifying. Ji Tianqing stared dumbfoundedly at the huge pit in the courtyard and the dust that filled the air. His heart was filled with shock. He silently fantasized about when he could reach such a level of power. One sword move could shake the earth. At this time, Xiang Wuji turned around and walked back under the eaves. Seeing his face full of shock and yearning, he said indifferently, "You're right. I don't want to destroy my own yard. I only used 10% of my power. Study it well. After 100 breaths, show it to me." You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.